Chapter 48. Yun Shusha regained some consciousness. She felt her stomach turn upside down and curled up in discomfort. Her small hand struggled to tear off the clothes on her body. The unfamiliar heat in her body made her want to immediately remove all the covers on her body. She completely lost her reason and the ability to think. She didn't know where she was. She only felt that she was in an abyss of suffering. Her lower abdomen was hot and dry, and her body felt an inexplicable chill. Half of it was a world of ice and snow, and the other half was a raging fire. It was like ice and fire at the same time. This kind of painful feeling made people go crazy. So hot, save me, Brother Chang looked at her and felt proud. Hunting passion powder was the most terrible drug in the black market. Without special channels, it was impossible to get such a good thing. Once she took even a little bit of it, even a chaste woman with strong willpower would not be able to resist it. Without a man, the feeling was simply worse than death. Not to mention this inexperienced woman. Yun Shusha turned slightly on the bed, and the pain was unbearable. But she didn't know that this action made her even more charming. Changgu quickly took off his clothes. He didn't even care that his pants were only half off before he excitedly climbed onto the bed. He couldn't wait to pounce on her. Little beauty, don't move. I'll help you. I'll let you feel comfortable later. Hee hee. At this moment, the doorbell rang. Brother Chang paused and his expression became distorted, but he didn't want to stop. Now that he was in the mood, what could be more depressing than being disturbed in the middle of it? He simply didn't want to care about the person outside the door and just wanted to continue this beautiful thing. However, just as his hand unbuttoned her clothes, the doorbell rang again. It was pressed urgently and seemed to be a little impatient. In this area of the capital, as long as he was in the circle, he would keep his word. Damn! Now, which blind fellow came to ruin his good mood? What a disappointment! Brother Chang's eyes instantly became unusually fierce. He turned his head abruptly and spat hatefully. He quickly put on his pants and went to open the door with his arms bared. As he cursed, he opened the door. When he raised his head, he saw two men in black standing tall at the door. Their strong bodies blocked the door, almost blocking all the light in the corridor. Li Dongjiang's originally ashen face suddenly sank, and his eyes revealed more or less a hint of fear. Even though he was part of the underworld and had seen a lot of things, he was still intimidated by the aura of these two men. Their auras were too terrifying, and their eyes were filled with murderous intent. They were like bloodthirsty killers in the dark night, cold and merciless. He swallowed hard and looked at them warily. You. What do you want to do? You've got the wrong person. The two men didn't say anything. They reached out and pulled him out from behind the door. Each of them grabbed one of his arms and lifted him up like he was a prisoner. Brother Chang was shocked and immediately cursed. Hey! What are you doing? Why are you grabbing me? You're ruining my good mood. I'm from the East Street. Do you know? If you know, then let me go. Damn! I spent 200,000 to buy that woman. Let me go. Chapter 49. The noise gradually faded away. Yun Shusha struggled to sit up. She lifted her heavy head and looked around with her blurry eyes. She felt as if the world in front of her was turning upside down. Her entire body seemed to have lost half of its strength. It was hot and soft. Seeing that there was no one around, she couldn't care about where she was. This torture had already worn away her last bit of rationality. She reached out her trembling hands and painfully tore at her dress. At the door, a tall figure walked in. The man's imposing aura was intimidating. The moment his tall figure appeared in the suite, the entire world seemed to become small. With a bang sound, the door closed and the room was once again dark. In the large suite, there was only the sound of her rapid and suffocating gasps. The blurred breaths kept coming out from those bewitching red lips. It was accompanied by soft moans that made people's faces turn red and their hearts beat faster. It was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable that it was as if there was a huge hole in her body that couldn't be filled. Her hands waved around in the air as if she was trying to grab something to fill it up. But she didn't know what this body needed. So empty, so empty. It was so empty that she felt like she was only left with an abyss. She reached out to touch her body and kept rubbing it. She wanted to stop that terrifying desire. But every time she touched it, her body would become numb and she couldn't control her excitement. Wuxia stepped through the darkness and slowly walked towards her. When he reached the bedside, he stood there and lowered his head. Under the retro light, the pure white blanket was wrapped around her waist. At this time, Yunshirshi's clothes were already disheveled. Her black shoulder strap had slipped off her round shoulders. Her face was strangely flushed, and her eyes were seductive. Her hands tore at her dress with great force, appearing to be in extreme pain. Wuxia looked at her coldly but didn't make a move. His gaze gradually turned cold. He never thought that they would meet again in this way. That man said that he bought her for 200,000. What, could it be that the remuneration he paid 6 years ago was far from enough? So much so that she didn't hesitate to sell her body for this kind of thing. Or was it that she had been like this for the past few years? And he was just the beginning of her using his body. Since then, how many people had touched her body? Wuxia's lips curled up in mockery. His clear and cold eyes contained a bone-piercing coldness and a hint of disgust. He turned around and wanted to leave. However, behind him, Yunshirsher suddenly found the strength to sit up on the bed. She stretched out her arms recklessly and wrapped them tightly around his waist from behind, refusing to let go. Don't go. I feel terrible, save me. The man's body stiffened, and a fragrant and soft jade was stuck to his back. She greedily stuck her small face to his back, and the hands around his waist groped up and down without knowing the propriety. She gasped and murmured, "Don't go. Save me, save me. Help me." Wuxia could no longer take another step. He slowly turned around and Yunshirsher took the opportunity to throw herself into his arms. Her hands tightly wrapped around his shoulders, and her weak and delicate body softly stuck to his body. It was as if this could comfort the lust in his heart. Only then did he realize that her delicate body was boiling hot as if her skin was being burned. Chapter 50. He was slightly startled and looked up in surprise. He reached out to hold her chin and turned her face over. Lowering his head, Wuxia saw that her eyes were blurred and deep. There was something wrong. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Yunshirsher clung onto his shoulders, leaned in, and eagerly kissed him on the lips. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and subconsciously tried to avoid her, but she hugged his neck tightly and did not let him avoid her. She broke into his mouth without any hesitation. She kissed him fiercely, but there was no technique. She was extremely inexperienced and even clumsy, and she was a little desperate. Just by relying on the raging desire in her body, she ravaged his cold thin lips as if she was possessed. Her teeth nibbled on his lips, and the tip of her tongue invaded his lips and teased him randomly. Her hot breath burned his breath. Even so, this kiss, which had no skill to speak of, still teased his body to the point where it was hard to endure. Yunshirsher kissed him crazily. Her kiss slid all the way down to his moving Adam's apple. The tip of her tongue hooked and gently bit him. Wuxia's body suddenly stiffened, and a dangerous look faintly appeared in his eyes. But she was completely undecided. Her empty body was uncomfortably hot. After a series of movements, her shoulder straps completely slipped off. Her dress slid down to her waist as the two bodies kept rubbing against each other. That smooth and delicate body was suddenly exposed to the air. The breathtaking beauty caused his body to rapidly grow hot and dry. Wuxia looked down at the woman in his arms who was causing trouble. She did not seem to realize what she was doing at all. He always had good self-control and could even get married without touching a woman for 3 years. But now, he could not stand her instigation. Save me, save me, the drug in her body was forcing her to seek more. Yunshisha opened her empty eyes. While he was in a daze, she anxiously reached out to buckle his belt and carelessly unbuckled it. Driven by her primitive instincts, she seemed to have forgotten herself. The man's sexy face was now covered in cold sweat, but he was trying to restrain the fire in his heart. His body had such a strong reaction to her. For more than 10 years, there was no lack of beautiful or enchanting women by his side. However, he was cold. No matter how the other women teased him, he did not feel anything. What he didn't know was that a man's body had a memory. Once he had tasted the beauty of the world, he would never be able to forget it. He didn't know what kind of magic was hidden in this woman's body, but she had the ability to make him crave for more. Yunshisha's trembling little hands were messing around in his arms, her movements rough and clumsy. She frowned slightly and followed her instincts, but in the end, she did not get the main point. Wuxia's throat tightened, and a numb feeling swept across his waist like an electric shock. This woman was deliberately forcing him to lose control. Hot. So hot. Help me, not knowing how to proceed, she kissed his thin lips with trembling hands, seeking his help. Hurry up and save me. Can you save me? It's so uncomfortable. Yunshisha straightened her body, her fair and beautiful arms slowly circling around his waist. Her breath, which smelled like orchids, brushed against his lips and completely destroyed his last bit of rationality. Wuxia raised his hand, and his 5 fingers suddenly threaded through her hair. His palm clasped the back of her neck, and her whole body was heavily pressed against him. He bit her lips fiercely, and his cold eyes focused on her face. Remember, this is what you said. Chapter 51. Yunshisha subconsciously followed her primitive instincts. Her hands tightly held onto his shoulders, as if she wanted to merge into each other's flesh and blood. The two of them intimately snuggled together without any gap between them. Heavily pressing her against the cold wall, Yunshisha couldn't help but gasp in pain. Wuxia lowered his head and kissed her lips, the tip of his tongue entering. At this moment, he couldn't help but sigh at the Creator's holiness and wisdom. The man he created was sexy and firm, while the woman was soft and charming. The perfect match between a man and a woman appeared at this moment. Wuxia tightly pinched her cheeks, as if to let her feel it. He purposely used force without any gentleness. He wanted her to wake up a bit. It would be best if she completely woke up, so that she could see who he was in front of her, and then see how he took her. He hated this woman, hated her frivolity. If he didn't appear in time, what would have happened in this room tonight? If the person in front of her wasn't him, then would her charm blossom for another man? Thinking about it, he couldn't suppress his anger. Hugging her soft waist, he bit down on her lips with even more force. She was no longer a young girl who had just experienced sex, and she was no longer the undeveloped body from 6 years ago. After the breastfeeding period, her figure had already developed. His roughness caused Yunshisha to be in pain. She couldn't help but let out a moan. She was almost out of breath from this fierce attack. Her small hands tightly hugged his neck. Forgetting herself, her small tongue licked his earlobe. Her coquettish gasps were close to his ear, and he almost couldn't control himself. This damned woman. She was simply a demonized butterfly spirit, just like the evil concubines of ancient times who brought disaster to the country. His movements became more and more rough. Yunshisha was in so much pain that she kept gasping. She subconsciously pushed his shoulders and softly said, "Don't. It hurts." It hurts. What? Isn't this what you want? Wuxia sneered, but he was even more presumptuous. His strength didn't decrease at all, and he lifted her skirt with one hand. Pain. However, this intense pain was suppressed by the raging flames in his body. His body was unable to stop an indescribable restlessness from growing. Yunshirsher helplessly hugged him even tighter. She was panting, and her watery eyes were misty. It was a mess that could not be any worse. It was so chaotic that she couldn't see anything clearly. She could only follow her instincts and keep asking. Lost in love, he held her firmly, but held back. He was not in a hurry to enter, as if he wanted to tease her. Grabbing her chin with one hand, he bit her lips fiercely and smiled wickedly. If you want it, come in yourself. The two of them pressed against each other intimately. The unparalleled sensory stimulation made her lose everything and even forget who she was. Her breathing quickened and her mind was in a mess. Following her instincts, she tightly held onto his shoulders and slowly lowered her body, until he was completely contained. As if the emptiness was filled, the sudden pleasure surged like waves. She couldn't help but raise her head and gasp for breath. There was a moment of clarity, but she sank into it again. Her body recovered very well. She hadn't been touched by anyone for 6 years. Everything was unbelievably beautiful. Under the influence of the drug, everything was spinning. Wuxia's throat tightened. In the midst of the numbness and entanglement, fine cold sweat moistened his thick black eyelashes. It was a perfect fusion. Both of them were extremely sensitive. Chapter 52. The two bodies were entangled together. Soon, both of them were drenched in sweat. Their bodies were already wet. That kind of suffocating feeling was as if the two of them were closely intertwined, as if they were going to blend into each other's bones and blood. It was as if it was extremely dazzling and carefree. Following that, there was an indescribable feeling of pleasure and passion. In the midst of passion, Yunshirsher climbed over his shoulders, grabbed his broad palm and intertwined her fingers with his. She then pulled his hand to her burning hot cheeks. His palm was a little rough and cold, but it gave her a great sense of relief. She was almost shivering when she pressed her lips against his cold thin lips. The gentle and warm touch made his heart beat faster. Wuxia could not help but hold his breath. He was actually stunned by this intimate kiss between lovers. This time, he did not avoid it. Instead, he pressed his lips tightly against hers and kissed her deeply. He closed his eyes and suddenly opened them again. His dark eyes stared at the woman who was as enchanting as a blooming flower for him. He suddenly hugged her and pressed her on the bed, occupying her to the greatest extent. Yunshirsher's breathing spilled out from her broken lips. In the end, after he fiercely thrust into her, the person under him trembled and held him tightly. It was as if a white light flashed in his mind. The two of them were finally forced to the dazzling clouds by this extreme wave. It had to be said that the passion-hunting powder's effect was really fierce. Wuxia pressed her down and wantonly wanted her for 3 more times. Only then did the effect of the drug dissipate. When he regained his senses from the lingering charm of passion, the sky was already bright. The person in his arms had dissipated the effect of the drug. She was so tired that she fell asleep. Her 2 arms were tightly wrapped around his waist. She was weak and helpless. Both of them were wet and sticky. Her half-wet hair was stuck to his chest and there were some traces of itchiness. Looking at her body, there were ambiguous kiss marks all over her body, as well as the bruises left by him. Every mark was a testimony to the crazy battle that lasted the entire night. He must be crazy to do this. They had been engaged for 3 years and he had always had outstanding self-control. He had never even touched a woman, but he had lost control over this woman again and again. He was obviously conflicted because he never had any self-control when it came to this woman. More importantly, she was Xiao Yichen's biological mother. Wuxia lowered his eyes and his gaze fell on her petite figure. She was so thin and weak that it was pitiful. His large palm gently covered her face. Her face was not even as big as his palm. He wondered what kind of life she had been living for the past 6 years. What kind of life trajectory was it? Back then, that sky-high amount of remuneration was almost the lifetime income of an ordinary person. She should be able to live a complete life, right? However, she was even thinner than 6 years ago. Her face was pale and weak, and her waist was so delicate that it seemed as if he could grasp it with one hand. Had she finished her studies in the past 6 years? Do you have a good job? Does he have a stable family? Or perhaps, she would get married. When he thought of this, his heart almost couldn't control itself. His heart suddenly skipped a beat, and for some unknown reason, a strange feeling arose in his heart. Was she married? Damn it, he was actually very concerned about this question. When he thought of this delicious woman, if other people were to touch even an inch of her, a flame ignited in his heart. Chapter 53. Wuxia, who was in a deep sleep, had no idea that the man beside her, who was holding her in his arms, was staring at her sleeping face with a knot in his heart. He sighed helplessly. He looked at the bruises all over her body and decided to wash up with her. He got up, carried her into the bathroom, and cleaned her up. For more than 20 years, he had always been the king in the limelight. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and lived a life of luxury. He had always been very particular and had never served anyone. Even his most beloved son was left to the nanny to take care of. He had never taken care of anything other than material things. As a result, his movements were extremely clumsy and he hurt her a few times. Even in her sleep, she still groaned in dissatisfaction like a weak kitten. It also seemed like she was acting coquettishly to him, making a silent complaint. Women were all delicate, and she was no exception. Which woman didn't yearn to be doted on and protected in the palm of his hand? However, in her bumpy life, no man had ever truly doted on her. Seeing her frown slightly, he actually didn't notice that his heart had softened. Even his movements couldn't help but become gentler. In the meantime, he called for room service and ordered the servants to change the crumpled sheets. If Wuxia was awake at this moment and saw the bed sheets that had been through war, she would be so embarrassed that she wouldn't be able to lift her head. When Wuxia carried her out of the bathroom, the bed was already clean and new. He carried her to the bed. The person in his arms was lying on his chest, sleeping soundly. In the morning, his assistant had sent the clothes over in advance. At the same time, he had also sent a woman's dress. Naturally, it was also expensive. There was a board meeting in the morning, so he didn't plan to stay any longer. After changing into an expensive suit, he was once again the elite of Empire, the business tycoon of Dishing Financial Group. After a night of sexual intercourse, there was not the slightest trace of exhaustion on his body. Wuxia turned to leave, but he heard a piercing ringtone. He looked back coldly. He wanted to ignore her, but he heard a ringtone coming from the pocket of her clothes on the sofa. It was ringing non-stop. The person on the bed seemed to be disturbed by the sound. She turned around and frowned. It was obvious that the loud ringing had alarmed her. He frowned coldly and strode over. He took out his phone from his pocket and hung up without hesitation. A missed call notification popped up on the screen. The man lowered his head and looked at the missed call with the name Yu. Wuxia slowly raised his brows. This name clearly sounded like a child's nickname. A strange feeling surfaced in his heart. Could it be that she already had a child? On Yu's 5th birthday, Wuxia bought a children's phone for Yu. It was thin and light with simple functions. In addition to sending and receiving messages, it also had a one-button alarm function. This was so that Yu could contact her immediately in an emergency. At that time, such a phone wasn't cheap. She had bought it so that it could be of use when the child was in danger. She had always been very willing to pour her heart and soul into the child. Wuxia was still in the midst of his surprise when his phone rang again. The words Yu appeared on the screen again. Chapter 54. Yu appeared on the screen again. This time, he didn't hang up but answered the call. The moment the call went through, the little guy's soft voice could be heard. Oh. Mommy, where are you? Yu can't find you, Mommy. He seemed to have just woken up as his voice was hazy and childish. Mommy? Wuxia raised his eyebrows. This woman really had a child. Could it be that she was already married and had a child? It didn't seem like it. If she was married, why would she go to such places alone in the middle of the night? And a man from the triads had spent $200,000 on her for a night. Ridiculous. Mommy? Mommy, are you there? Seeing that there was no sound, little Munchkin was a little scared and his voice was filled with danger. Mommy, where are you? Hurry and answer Yu. Wuxia frowned and looked at the woman who was sleeping soundly on the bed. He said lightly, Your mommy is with me. His deep and cold voice was mature and had the aura of a king, but it scared Yu. The little guy asked in a cautious voice, Who are you? Are you a bad person? Being alert was a child's trait. Wuxia pondered for a moment and held his forehead helplessly. I am. He didn't know how to answer at that moment. He couldn't say for sure. Who was he to her? Was he her employer? That was 6 years ago. He was no longer her employer now. He sneered again. Was he her sugar daddy now? Why is mommy with you? The little guy asked anxiously. Your mommy is busy. He gave a perfunctory answer. Obviously, he didn't want to waste too much time with this little guy. Really? It was a lame lie, but the little guy unexpectedly believed it. His tone instantly became cautious. Then Yu, did I disturb mommy's work? She subconsciously associated I'm busy with work. What a naive child. No. Wuxia's tone was gentle. He didn't know why, but he couldn't be as cold as usual when facing this child. Mommy, you've worked so hard. Uncle, don't let her work the night shift anymore. Yu is scared when she doesn't see mommy in the middle of the night. Yu's soft and cute voice reminded him of Mui Chen. It was the same situation when she acted coquettishly towards him. It was as beautiful as the sound of nature. Could it be that all her children had inherited her beautiful voice? When she acted coquettishly, she whined like a kitten. Night shift. The night shift that Yu mentioned sounded extremely grating to Wuxia. It turned out that what happened last night was not an accident. She must have frequented those kinds of places, like a butterfly spirit, like those filthy women, mingling with many sugar daddies. What a slut. She looked pure and clean, but deep down, she was just as vulgar. However, he couldn't bear to brush off the child on the phone with a cold attitude. He only said indifferently, I understand. Next time, I won't let your mommy work the night shift. Does uncle have the final say in the company? Yes. Yu suddenly laughed and said, then, uncle must be the boss. Since mommy works so hard, can uncle give her a raise? Then, he can give her a full-service bonus at the end of the year, some consolation gifts on Women's Day, and some bonuses on Mother's Day. As a boss, you must be generous so that your employees will work hard for you. Chapter 55. What a clever boy. Wuxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This child was actually a clever one. Okay, I'll give you a raise. Coaxing a child was a piece of cake. Just like how he coaxed Xiao Chen, he easily dismissed the little boy. Before hanging up the phone, the little boy didn't forget to take care of him seriously like an adult. "Uncle, please take care of Mommy." "Thank you." After hanging up the phone, Yu stared at the phone in his hand. His eyes suddenly darkened. Yun Shishir didn't return home the whole night, and the little boy didn't sleep well either. He couldn't see her in the morning, so he was worried. He lied to the teacher that he wasn't feeling well and asked for sick leave. The teacher happily agreed. In kindergarten, he didn't act like he did in front of Yun Shishir. He was almost a genius with high EQ and IQ. Even the teacher was extremely surprised. What was even more amazing was that this child was not only gifted, but also mature and steady at such a young age. Although he was no different from a 5-year-old child in front of Yun Shishir, he had no intention of hiding it in front of the teachers and students. While the other children were still struggling to count to 10, he had already solved advanced mathematics questions that even the top high school students couldn't solve. Although it was unbelievable, it was the truth. In fact, although he wasn't even 7 years old, he was already a member of Mensa International. This international organization gathered almost all the geniuses in the world. It was known as the world's top IQ club, and high IQ was the only requirement to join. In the organization, Yu was the youngest, but he had the highest IQ. There were even more shocking secrets hidden behind him. However, Yu usually didn't reveal his talents because Mommy liked his warm and cute side. If possible, he wanted to be Mommy's little god of warmth for the rest of his life. After hanging up the phone, he frowned. Obviously, he felt that this matter wasn't that simple. This man's identity was very suspicious. After hanging up the phone, Mu Yaja lowered his head and looked at the outdated phone. Without looking at it, he removed the card and threw it into the trash can. He turned around, opened the door, and left. What he didn't know was that he didn't return that night, and the Mu residence was brightly lit. For the whole night, Mu Wanra waited for Mu Yaja to come home. But this time, she waited until dawn, but he was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, Mu Wanra was sitting in the dining room. The atmosphere was heavy. She was so angry that she wanted to smash something. The servants behind her were all trembling with fear, afraid that they would be implicated. Mu Yaja's concept of time was very fixed. It was already dark. No matter how big the case was, he would still go home to handle it. Only because, every night, she would accompany Xiao Yichen to have dinner, study with him, and do his homework. This was something that could not be changed. Last night, he missed the appointment for the first time. Xiao Yichen sulked the entire night. He did not do his homework or eat dinner. He was already used to Mu Yaja's company. Now that he wasn't around, he wasn't in the mood. Even when he went to school in the morning, he was still sullen. As for Mu Yaja, even if they were never husband and wife, he would at least go home on time to accompany Xiao Yichen. What was so important last night that it was even more important than accompanying Xiao Yichen? Mu Wanra's heart was twisted. In a moment of anger, she threw the glass of milk beside her to the ground. The glass shattered and scratched a servant's face. Chapter 56. Young mistress, don't be angry. Young master must have something important to do, something important. What could be so important that he didn't return home last night? Mu Wanra was so angry that she laughed instead, the veins on her face showing. She felt uneasy, so uneasy. It was as if something precious to her was going to be snatched away from her. Mu Wanra bit her lower lip as an unprecedented sense of uneasiness engulfed her. Alcohol was really an annoying thing, not to mention to people who were allergic to it. When Yun Shishir woke up, it was already 2 in the afternoon. She opened her sleepy eyes and saw the luxurious decoration in the luxurious suite. She was a little confused and didn't know why she was here. Then, her mind was blank. After a night of sexual intercourse, her mind was still in a confused state and she couldn't recognize the scene in front of her. The side effects of the drug made her memory of what happened last night unclear. She only vaguely remembered that after drinking that glass of wine, she was drunk and lost her mind. She had completely forgotten what happened after that. After a night of sexual intercourse, her body was exhausted. But other than that, she didn't understand what happened. Why was she lying here naked? Thinking about it, she was terrified and frightened. Last night's passion, which seemed to be filled with the flames of war, had almost broken all the bones in her body. However, she still couldn't make up her mind. She subconsciously moved her body, wanting to get up. But just as she moved her legs, she felt a wave of soreness. Then, there was a tearing pain in her lower body. Yun Shishir's heart skipped a beat. This feeling wasn't unfamiliar to her. This was clearly a feeling that only came about after experiencing the deed. Her gaze was a little sluggish. She reached out and lifted the quilt, but she was shocked by her bruises all over her body. Those densely packed kiss marks, as well as those ambiguous kiss marks, were as terrifying as being bitten by poisonous insects. At that moment, her heart suddenly jumped, and she was petrified as if she had been struck by lightning. In the dressing mirror, her whole face was like a cracked mask, on the verge of shattering. It was obvious that she understood what had happened to her. Although, in these 6 years, she had never done it with a man. But, she was no longer the ignorant 16-year-old girl. After experiencing sex, the soreness at the base of her thighs invisibly complained to her about what had happened last night. Yun Shishir held her forehead in frustration. She tried hard to recall what had happened last night, but her memory stopped at the moment when she was forced to drink. After that, her memory was blurry, and she couldn't recall anything. She only remembered the man who was called Brother Chang. Could it be him? God! What kind of trouble did she get herself into? Yun Na owed her money. Did she have to torture her just because she was Yun Na's sister? A wave of destructive despair hit her. She was tongue-tied as she opened her mouth, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Yun Shishir heard a familiar voice, Yun SSS. Miss Yun, you're awake. Startled, Yun Yunt. Chapter 57. She saw a straight figure sitting on the sofa. She was dressed in a well-ironed business suit and had her hair tied up in a bun. She looked like a woman. She was in a state of shock just now and didn't realize that there was a second person in the room. She narrowed her eyes, trying to see her face clearly. However, the room was too dark, so she couldn't see her face clearly. She had some impression of this voice, but she couldn't remember it clearly. She was stunned for a moment. You are. When the man saw that she had woken up, he slowly stood up and walked to the window. With a pull of his hand, he pulled the curtains open. With the sunlight shining in, the woman politely turned around. Yun Shishir finally saw her face clearly. So familiar, so familiar. She must have seen this woman before, but she couldn't remember. Secretary Lee saw that she was still in a state of confusion and didn't care about her scrutinizing gaze. She took some warm water and a small pill from the table and handed it over respectfully. Miss Yun, please take your medicine. After what happened last night, Yun Shishir was much more cautious when strangers handed her things. She stared straight at her and didn't reach out to take it. Secretary Lee seemed to understand her worries and smiled. Don't worry. This is the morning after pill. I'm sure Miss Yun doesn't want to have any problems. Please take the medicine. Yun Shishir took the medicine in a daze and drank it with warm water. The medicine went down her throat and into her stomach. She was so nervous that even her lips were trembling. Secretary Lee swiftly brought her a new set of clothes, including a new set of underwear. All the measurements were just right, neither too big nor too small. Yun Shishir saw it and her cheeks burned. She grabbed her underwear and stared at her uncomfortably. The latter understood and left the room. Yun Shishir then started to put on her clothes. When she opened the door, she saw her standing outside. When she saw that Yun Shishir was dressed, she calmly turned around and said to her, "Miss Yun, are you ready?" At that moment, her elegant smile opened up a memory that had been sealed away for a long time. This woman was clearly, Yun Shishir suddenly reacted. She pointed her finger stiffly at her and widened her eyes in disbelief. Did this woman just feed her the contraceptive pill? How ironic. 6 years ago, because of that contract, this woman was very careful in everything, no matter how big or small, to protect her child. When they met again 6 years later, she didn't allow her to refuse and fed her contraceptive pills. She didn't respond to her surprise at all. She just smiled and said, "The president wants to see you." "I won't see him." She immediately refused. "I can't see him." "I won't." It was impossible for Yun Shishir to forget this woman. On the contrary, she remembered her deeply. Although she didn't recognize her at first glance, she still remembered the secretary who had accompanied her for 8 months during her long pregnancy 6 years ago. But for a moment, there were too many doubts and uneasiness in her heart. She didn't understand why the first person to appear in front of her in such a chaotic moment when she opened her eyes was her. Then what exactly happened last night? Was it related to that man? How could this be? That's impossible, but if it wasn't because of this, then what was it? Yu. Could it be that this man knew about Yu's existence, so he came to find her and asked her for Yu back? Chapter 58. Yu. Oh my God. She couldn't let anyone take it away from her. Yun Shishir suddenly realized that it was already afternoon. If Yu didn't see her when he woke up, wouldn't he be worried about her? She subconsciously wanted to touch her pocket, but then she realized that her clothes were no longer her old ones, and her phone was gone. She turned around and wanted to go to her room to find her phone to make a call, but she was stopped by her secretary. "Miss Yun, what are you? I'm going to find my phone." Yun Shishir didn't dare to mention Yu. She was only worried that Yu would be worried about her at home. Lilan smiled and took out a brand new branded phone from her briefcase. She handed it over and said with a smile, "This is your new phone. The SIM card is also in it." The phone was the latest model from Apple. It had a big screen, a fast 4G network, and a fingerprint unlock. It was worth a few thousand yuan. Yun Shishir had always used functional phones that cost a few hundred yuan. She was never willing to buy a phone that cost a few thousand yuan. For me. She took it in a daze. She didn't understand why she was giving her a phone. "Yes. Your phone is broken. This is a little gift from the CEO. Please accept it." She felt strange. How could a phone be broken? She didn't expect that Muyaja would throw it away when he saw that the phone was too outdated. Yun Shishir was a little nervous. She felt that the cold phone in her hand was a little hot. She faintly guessed that the man who had sex with her last night was the CEO she was talking about. She was his secretary. If it wasn't for that man, she probably wouldn't have appeared in front of her today to feed her medicine and deal with these funeral arrangements. She had no impression of that man at all. That night, her eyes were covered by someone, so she didn't see his face clearly for the whole night until he left. She could only vaguely make out the outline of his tall figure through the hazy moonlight. He was tall, slender, and handsome. His figure was like a perfect god. However, that night was an unforgettable nightmare for her for 6 years. She forced herself to forget the 6 years of nightmares. If it wasn't for Yu, she would probably still be unable to let go. Even though she kept telling herself that everything was in the past and that she had Yu because of that man, she still couldn't let go of the shame in her heart. So for the past 6 years, even though she had countless suitors, she had always kept a distance from those men. She didn't need men. She was already satisfied with having Yu. Yu would be her support for the rest of her life. So, no matter what, she had to protect Yu. Even if that man wanted to take Yu away from her, she would not allow it to happen. However, when she heard the word CEO, she felt like she was in a dream. She froze as if she had been struck by lightning. Despite her unwillingness, she was still invited. In front of the Bentley, the door was opened for her. Secretary Lee respectfully gestured for her to get in. "Miss Yun, please get in the car." In the back seat, the man sat lazily. His posture was noble and elegant, but he did not look at her. Instead, he stared coldly in front of him. His handsome side profile made him look reserved and cold, just like an arrogant emperor. However, even though it was only one meeting, Yun Shishir could still recognize him at a glance. Chapter 59. It's him. Is this the employer with a net worth of billions? He's young and stunningly handsome. "Miss Yun, please get in the car." "Miss Yun, please get in the car." "Miss Yun. Miss Yun." Li Lan invited her again, but Yun Shishir kept her head down and didn't say a word. She stood still in front of the car and didn't show any signs of moving. Li Lan walked over doubtfully and put her hand on Yun Shishir's shoulder. She felt that Yun Shishir's entire body was trembling slightly and her lips were trembling violently. Li Lan was surprised. Is she afraid? Afraid of seeing the CEO? Why, if it were any other ordinary woman, they would be shocked to see the CEO. However, she could see that Yun Shishir was trembling. "Miss Yun." She carefully pushed her shoulder as she half pushed and half forcefully invited her into the car. Yun Shishir wanted to hide. She really wanted to turn around and run away from this satanic man. However, her legs were stiff. Li Lan's actions didn't allow her to dodge at all. It was as if she was forced into the car. She bit her lips and clenched her fists tightly as she got into the car. Bang! The sound of the car door closing. He had locked her in his world. It was as if she was isolated from the world. At that moment, she felt as if she was in an ice cellar. She felt cold from head to toe, so helpless. She was afraid. She was afraid that this man would dig out her ribs and take away her beloved Yu. Yun Shishir was so nervous that she was trembling all over. She lowered her head anxiously and didn't dare to look up at him. Her mind was in a mess. When she first saw this man, she felt dizzy as if the world was spinning. She also felt that God was teasing her. Then, she felt an uncontrollable chill in her heart. How could it be him? The arrogant man who bumped into her that day. The man from last night, could it be him? She couldn't be wrong. Even though she couldn't remember what happened, she could smell the seductive fragrance on the man's body. "The president wants to see you." Recalling Li Lan's respectful words, Yun Shishir's heart is terribly cold. Why does he want to see her? Or was it just as she had guessed, that this man knew about Yu's existence and was here to ask her for Yu back? At the thought of this possibility, Yun Shishir felt her vision darken, and her heart sank into the abyss of despair. There was no movement in the carriage for a long time. The rustling sound of a fountain pen rubbing against a piece of paper could be heard. The atmosphere was so tense that it was almost suffocating. Yun Shishir's forehead was covered with fine sweat, and her palms were soaked with cold sweat. She opened her mouth, wanting to break the strange silence, but to her chagrin, she realized that she had such an intimate relationship with him, but she didn't even know this man's name, or even his surname. She closed her eyes tightly and opened her mouth in defeat. She said in an obscure voice, "President." "Sir, you..." Before she could finish speaking, she was forcefully pulled by him. Her vision turned upside down, and before she could understand what was happening, she was pulled onto his body, and in an extremely ambiguous position, she was tightly overlapped with him. Chapter 60. Yun Shishir sucked in a gasp of shock. She looked up in shock, only to meet his deep and dark eyes. The man smiled and reached out to clasp her chin, forcing her to meet his deep gaze. His enchanting and slender fingers caressed her slightly pale lips, and he heavily pressed his lips against hers. Until she let out a painful gasp. He smiled again, the corners of his lips forming a sexy arc as his thin lips tugged upwards. He was wearing a well-ironed black shirt and a pair of slender trousers. The top 2 buttons of his shirt were slightly unbuttoned, faintly revealing the wild and beautiful curves of his muscles. He was tall and straight. Even in such a spacious space, it couldn't help but seem a little narrow. That innate imperial aura made the atmosphere in the entire car become oppressive. Yun Shishir looked at him evasively and suddenly felt that it was a little difficult to breathe. This was her employer from 6 years ago. Previously, because she had been blindfolded, she didn't have any impression of this man. But now that she saw him, he was younger than she had imagined. Moreover, he was shockingly handsome and had a heroic spirit. However, his bewitching eyes and deep smile made her feel even more uneasy. Wuxia studied the various emotions that surfaced on her face with great interest. Uneasiness, fear, shock, and surprise. She seemed to be shy, but more than that, she was afraid. However, it was precisely this kind of naive reaction that made people feel that she was so cute. It wasn't that kind of pretentious. This kind of cuteness, sometimes, could make men want to cherish her. Sometimes, it made people want to ruthlessly ravage, violate, or even conquer her, so that they could enjoy her aggrieved and coquettish expression. Realizing that his gaze was getting deeper, Yun Shishir's heart tightened and she looked down. Her eyelashes were trembling slightly, and her eyes were somewhat flustered. Her small hands were tangled together, and she looked very pitiful. However, her expression was extremely seductive. Looking at her, he thought of last night's passionate night. Thinking of this woman's shy and coquettish manner under his body, his lower abdomen inexplicably heated up. His body couldn't help but yearn for her. He even wanted to do her ruthlessly in this car. As he thought of this, he moved and held the back of her neck. He pressed down heavily on her and kissed her soft lips. He sucked away her warm breath and the tip of his tongue domineeringly entered her mouth. He hooked her lilac and lingered endlessly as he wantonly sucked her saliva from between her lips and teeth. This extremely aggressive kiss scared her to death. Panicking, she hastily placed her small hands on his chest and pushed him away with all her might. This only served to further ignite his ambition to conquer her. This kiss was deeper and more passionate until she was almost unable to breathe. He finally let go of her. However, Wuxia couldn't bear to let her go just like that. Hence, with some longing, he bit her little mouth which was slightly swollen from his invasion and licked her lips to appease her. Yun Shishir was a little dazed by this kiss. She stared blankly and only regained her senses after some time, her cheeks burning up. Her reaction was really clumsy. She was even stunned and didn't know how to respond. Chapter 61. He believed that even if her acting skills were perfect, she wouldn't be able to pretend to be so original. Wuxia had a playful look in his eyes. Could it be that after these 6 years, this girl still hadn't truly transformed into a woman? However, he was satisfied. At least for now, this woman's beauty was still his alone. Seemed like he was no different from a normal man. He pitied such a pure and gentle girl, but he also liked her coquettish manner last night. He chuckled and teased, "Why are you so shy?" The man's voice was mature and pleasant to the ears. It was mellow and extremely magnetic, but it made her heart skip a beat and her cheeks turn red. Seeing her like this, it was even more interesting. He smiled, but his words were even more explicit. "Last night, when we were in bed, you weren't like this." Wuxia caressed her soft waist and, intentionally or unintentionally, lifted the corner of her skirt. His big hand reached in and rubbed her smooth back, invading the city. Yunshisha was shocked. She hurriedly pressed down on his hand and stopped him. Don't. He looked up. His gaze was deep and dark, but there was a glimmer of light. Don't be like this. Yunshisha rejected him seriously, unlike other women who wanted to reject him. That's not what you said yesterday. Yunshisha lowered her head in shock. Only then did she realize that she was sitting on top of him. She realized that their posture was a little too intimate. She finally retreated a little uneasily, but her waist was held tightly by his big palm. Thus, this time, she couldn't avoid it. Her heart sank as she said softly, I'm sorry. Yesterday was an accident. I don't know what happened either. Anyway, if it caused you any trouble. I'm really sorry. He interrupted her lazily. I'm very satisfied. When she looked up in surprise, there was a sky-high check in front of her. The amount was written in the column of 2 million. She looked at the bold and beautiful signature at the bottom of the check, Wuxia. Yunshisha was stunned for a moment. She didn't understand his intention. She smiled awkwardly and said, Sir, what do you mean? She was really in a mess. Why did this man give her a blank check? What did he mean by that? Could it be that he was treating her as that kind of woman? Yunshisha's eyes couldn't help but be tainted with a trace of anger. She couldn't wait to get out of the car right now and run as far away as possible from this man. The man's lips curled up mockingly. Yunshisha's doubts became another meaning in his eyes. What? Is 2 million not enough? What? Yunshisha was even more puzzled. Woman, are you really innocent, or are you pretending to be innocent? The man pinched her chin, so hard that tears came out of her eyes. What I'm asking is this check enough to buy you for one night? When Yunshisha heard this, she was stunned for a long time and did not react for a long time. Wuxia thought that she thought the price was too low. Is it not enough? He paused for a moment. His well-defined jaw looked cold and heartless at this moment. Every word of his was like the tip of a knife, cutting into her dignity. Then how much do you need to buy you for one night? A villa, a bungalow, a Mercedes-Benz. Whatever you want, just tell me. I have it all. Chapter 62. Are you mistaken? Yunshisha suddenly laughed coldly, her face full of anger. Sir, what do you think I am? A prostitute with a price tag? I'm sorry. I'm not. I don't want your money. Saying that, she struggled hard, trying to break free from his restraint. Her resistance, in Wuxia's eyes, became another method. This woman, could it be that she knew how to play hard to get to arouse a man's desire to conquer? This woman said that she didn't lack money, then what was last night? That man bought her for 200,000, he offered 100 times, 1,000 times more, was that not enough respect? If you think that the price is not enough, you can just say it. Whatever you want, I will satisfy it one by one. But don't come up with such a clumsy lie. Wuxia said coldly. I don't want it. Do you think I want to go to your villa? Yunshisha held back her tears and sneered, what you said, I don't want it all. Keep it for yourself. Then what was last night? If you are a pure woman, why did you lie on someone else's bed? Wuxia suddenly laughed cruelly. He bought you for 200,000, I offered 220 million, it is already a great gift to you. Thinking of last night, if it wasn't for him, then what kind of situation would she have with that disgusting man? She was obviously a woman who would do anything for money, but why did she pretend to be virtuous in front of him? Gift? When Yun Shishir heard that, she was stunned and as stiff as a rock. Last night. She already couldn't remember what happened, she only remembered that in her blurry memory, there was a man's handsome silhouette. When she woke up, her whole body was sore, she was no longer a girl, so she knew clearly what happened last night. But no matter what, it was an accident, it wasn't up to this man to interrogate her. Who did he think he was? That he was her master. Could it be that because of this accident, this man gave her an unpardonable death sentence and believed that she was a woman who only cared about money? Or, in his eyes, she was such a lowly woman. What? Don't tell me you want me to be grateful for your favor. Yun Shishir suddenly smiled coldly. On her pale face, the pair of beautiful and clear eyes were dim like a black jade covered in dust. So, Mr. CEO wants to buy me. Wuxia calmly hugged her neck and whispered in her ear, otherwise. Why do you want to buy me? Yun Shishir pretended to be calm and smiled. Mr. CEO, you are as arrogant as a god, handsome and elegant, you are never lacking in women, right? The smile on Wuxia's face instantly froze. His lips were tightly pursed, and there was a tinge of tension in his eyes. In the capital, his power was overwhelming, and there was no lack of beauties around him. Those who coveted his daughter from a prestigious family were even more plentiful. It was never difficult for Wuxia to choose a woman for himself. But his body was picky and only reacted passionately to this woman. Whenever he got close to her, a certain part of his body would become as hot as iron. The desire to possess her was like a raging fire, almost burning his rationality. But other women couldn't. Yun Shishir saw that he was silent and smiled coldly. Mr. CEO, I am very expensive. Can you afford it? Wuxia smiled deeply. How much? Chapter 63. 200 million. The moment she opened her mouth, it was a sky-high price. Wuxia smiled faintly. Even if Dishing Financial Group was as rich as a country and he was extravagant, he still had to see if it was worth it. 200 million. You? Can you afford it? Didn't you ask me how much I want? Didn't you say that you have everything you need? A villa, a luxury car, and money. I just want 200 million from you. Can't you afford it? Yun Shishir smiled, picked up a corner of the check, and tore it into pieces right in front of him. You're just a so-so. Wuxia's face was tense and frosty. Yun Shishir did not know where she got the courage to grab the man's chin. Wuxia's facial features were extremely handsome, especially the curve of his chin. She looked straight at him and suddenly sneered. Men are so despicable. You're guarding your heart, but you want to spend money to buy a woman. Mr. CEO, don't you know that what you buy is never true? How much is your heart worth? Wuxia suddenly became interested. He found this woman very interesting and asked back, 200 million. Is it worth it? Yun Shishir's smile grew colder. Right in front of him, she tore the check in her hand into pieces and threw them at his face. No one's heart can be clearly priced. If you want it. Yun Shishir paused and used her fingertips to poke at his heart. At least exchange it with your here. Wuxia was still in a daze. Yun Shishir suddenly pushed him away, unlocked the car door at lightning speed, opened the door, and jumped out of the speeding Bentley. Fortunately, the Bentley happened to hit a traffic signal and was not going fast. Yun Shishir got up from the ground, covered her bruised elbow, and ran away without looking back. Her fluttering white dress was like a fluttering white butterfly, beautiful and moving. The Bentley came to an abrupt stop. The secretary, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, was stunned when she saw the girl jump out of the car. Her heart was already filled with shock. In the capital, Chairman Mu had always beckoned with his finger. No matter if it was a young model, a diva, or a young lady from a prestigious family, they would always be overwhelmed by his favor. However, the CEO had always been cold and had never taken a fancy to any woman. If he took a second look at a woman, her heart would probably jump out of her throat. In the entertainment empire controlled by the Mu Group, any artiste in the circle who was involved in a scandal with the president would be hyped up by the entertainment reporters. But this girl rejected him from 1,000 miles away. What was he thinking? If she could catch the CEO's eye, she would not have to worry about wealth and glory for the rest of her life. It didn't seem like she was playing hard to get. The way she looked at the president was as if she was guarding against a wolf. It was as if the president was some kind of ferocious beast that would eat her alive. Thinking of this, she smiled and said, "Chairman Mu, this girl is really stubborn. She's different from the other women." From the bottom of her heart, she admired this girl who was humble on the surface but proud on the inside. Mu Yaja retracted his gaze and did not linger any longer. His eyes were filled with coldness. "Drive." The Bentley started slowly and sped away. When Yu saw that Yun Shirshir had not returned home, he went out and wanted to get a new phone. The children's phone that Yun Shirshir had bought for him was too childish. At the crucial moment, he wanted to use technology to locate Yun Shirshir's location, but there was no way. He was born with a gift, so his learning ability was very good since he was young. Chapter 64. When Yu was 4 years old, he was already able to assemble his own supercomputer. Even the top scientific laboratories could not compare to his advanced system. Although he was not even 7 years old, his achievements had already attracted the attention of the world. However, all of this was a secret that he had buried deep in his heart. When he passed by the bookshelf, he accidentally caught a glimpse of an entertainment magazine. Yu's gaze was inexplicably attracted by the handsome man in the magazine. He gently tiptoed and took down the brand new magazine. He skimmed through it. The title was "A Mysterious Woman Hooks Up with Mu's Crown Prince, Has a Secret Rendezvous in the Middle of the Night, Suspected Secret Relationship Exposed." The cover of the magazine was a candid shot of a handsome man and a slender girl with a blurry figure at the entrance of a hotel. The mysterious woman was none other than Lu Yushi, who was now known as the new starlet. Lu Yushi rose to fame because of her scandal with Heavenly King Gu Xingze. At that time, her scandal with him was unparalleled and it was on the front page of the 3 major entertainment media. After that, she signed a contract with Worldwide Entertainment in a high-profile manner and took on a movie that Worldwide Entertainment invested in. She became famous overnight as the female lead in the movie and was known as the Goddess of Huanyu. The public speculated that Worldwide Entertainment was willing to promote her because she had an ambiguous relationship with the person in charge behind Worldwide Entertainment, and this person was Mu Yaja. As for how the magazine was able to capture this picture, it was probably mostly due to luck. They had always wanted to gossip about Lu Yushi's mysterious private background, but they had inadvertently captured this ambiguous picture. Mu Yaja had never been involved in any scandals before, so it was rarely published in the newspapers. It was precisely because of the influence and prominent status of the Mu Corporation, coupled with the fact that he had always been mysterious, that most of the news about him was just groundless speculation. Moreover, if any newspaper or magazine dared to publish a scandal about him, they would probably receive a negotiation call from the Mu Corporation the next day. However, what attracted Yu's attention was not the title, but the man in the photo. His facial features, eyebrows, eyes, and even his demeanor were 80% similar to his own. It was as if they were cast from the same mold. Oh, Yu widened his eyes in disbelief. He looked at the cover of the magazine and subconsciously touched his little face. There was a strange and suspicious look in the depths of his eyes. The same deep and captivating eyes, the same exquisite and straight nose, and even the same thin lips. Yu's mind was in a mess. Damn it. Similar, too similar. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. He and this man were simply copying and pasting. With many doubts in his mind, Yu left the bookstore and bought the magazine. As he walked down the street, he lowered his head in thought. Suddenly, a Bentley drove by. The old man sitting at the back of the car leaned on his cane and leaned back with a solemn expression. However, when he inadvertently cast his gaze out of the window, he caught a glimpse of an extremely familiar figure. "Stop!" he yelled, and the driver was shocked. He slammed on the brakes and stopped the Bentley by the side of the road. "Master, what's wrong?" The old man sat quietly and looked out of the window. His gaze was like an eagle's. Chapter 65. He watched as the child slowly walked past the car. Little Munchkin's handsome side profile, deep facial features, and the way he looked deep in thought. The elegant curve of his lips and his refined temperament were exactly the same as Mu Yage's when he was young. He was even carved from the same mold as Xiao Yichen. If it weren't for the different temperament between his eyebrows and Xiao Yichen's, elegant, deep, mature, and steady. He even thought that this child was Xiao Yichen. He was slightly surprised. This child's appearance was so similar to Mu Yage's. He was about 6 or 7 years old, and he could tell that he came from an ordinary family. How could there be such a coincidence? A gentle breeze blew past, and the child's silky hair brushed past his face. He raised his head slightly and took a closer look. This was definitely not a coincidence. The old man reached out to open the car door. When the chauffeur saw this, he hurriedly got out of the car and walked over to help him. However, the old man pushed him away and walked quickly toward the child with his cane. The chauffeur hurriedly followed. Old Master's health wasn't good, and he had to go to the hospital regularly every month. Before leaving, young Madam had repeatedly told him to take good care of Old Master. He couldn't let anything go wrong. Yu walked at a steady pace, but he gradually distanced himself from the old man. The old man pointed at him, and the chauffeur hurriedly strode forward. He grabbed Yu's sleeve and stopped him. "Stop right there." Yu was blocked by an unfamiliar man. He didn't know what was going on and stopped in his tracks. However, due to his good upbringing, he smiled elegantly. "Uncle, what's the matter?" An old man's voice came from behind him. "Child, turn around and let me take a look at you." When Yu heard this, he casually turned around and smiled at the old man. He was very cultured and knew how to be polite and respect the old man. The old man looked to be in his 60s. Although he didn't look very energetic and was a little thin, his gaze was sharp. Although there was no expression on his face, he exuded a dignified aura without being angry. His entire person exuded an extremely dignified and intimidating aura. It was obvious that he was a man who had experienced the wind and rain. With one look, one could tell that he was a big shot when he was young. Sizing up the child at such a close distance, it was simply unbelievable. This child was already so big. Could it be that he was Mu Yage's illegitimate child? How was this possible? Aja had always been heartless to women. How could he have such a big child with another woman behind his back? She looked like she was carved out of the same mold as Xiao Yichen. Unbelievable. "Child, what's your name?" Yu smiled elegantly. He did not know why, but he did not like this old man staring at him. His thin lips curled up slightly. Although he was smiling, his eyes were cold and distant. "Grandpa, before my mommy left, she told me not to talk to strangers." The old man was shocked. This child's eyes and tone were shockingly mature and steady. His boldness and demeanor did not resemble that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. He was just like Mu Yage when he was 9 years old. He was smart, deep, and mature. His deep gaze was extremely similar. "Who's your mommy? Tell me. Who my mommy is has nothing to do with you." After he finished speaking, He curled his lips into a smile and turned to leave. However, the chauffeur stopped him again. The chauffeur was a martial arts practitioner. He did not know his limits and hurt him. The smile on Yu Yu's face immediately turned cold. Chapter 66. He lowered his eyes and glanced at the arm in front of him. The corners of his lips curled up and his thick eyelashes drooped down, perfectly concealing the playfulness in his eyes. "Grandpa, are these the subordinates you've trained?" Yu Yu glanced coldly at the chauffeur beside him and said calmly, "Aren't you afraid of losing your cool by letting your subordinate make things difficult for a child?" The old man stared at him for a long while before turning his head and waving his hand. "Ah, hi, don't be rude." The chauffeur immediately understood and retracted his arm. Yu Yu straightened his sleeves that were crumpled by the chauffeur and turned to leave. The old man stared blankly at his back as he frowned and pursed his lips. "Old master, ah hi, find a way to investigate this child's background," the old man ordered as he tapped his cane. He had to investigate this child thoroughly. This was because his intuition told him that there was no mistake. This child was definitely the blood of the Mu family. When he reached home, Yu Yu put down his school bag and put on his teddy bear apron. He moved a small stool over and started to get busy in the kitchen. He cooked, washed the vegetables, turned on the stove, and fried the wok. Little Munchkin stepped on the stool and held a large spoon in his hand. In less than an hour, a meal that was comparable to a 5-star restaurant was served on the table. He looked at the time and saw that it was not time to get off work yet. He took his clothes to the balcony and washed them, but Yun Shishir was still nowhere to be seen. Little Munchkin raised his eyebrows and took out a magazine from his school bag. He flipped through it page by page and looked at the photos. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he took out his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. Then, he took out a voice changer. This was a gadget that he had assembled himself. He had set up the voice of an adult man and stuck it next to the phone's microphone. It could change his childish voice into a deep man's voice. "Agent Lee, I'm Arthur." A man's respectful voice came from the other end. "Yes. President, what can I do for you?" Yu Yu tilted her head and tapped her fingers rhythmically on the table. A glint flashed across her eyes. "Go and investigate a person's background for me. I want to know all of his information and movements." "Yes, President." "Please go ahead." Yu Yu's gaze fell on the photo in the magazine again. His fair, jade-like fingertips slowly caressed the side of the man's handsome face as he smiled. "CEO of Dishing Financial Group, Mu Yaja." "Understood. Everything, no matter how big or small, please make a report and send it to my email." "All right." Yun Tianyu ended the call and fell into deep thought. He never believed that there would be two identical leaves in the world. He also didn't believe that there would be a man in this world who looked so similar to him. He even faintly suspected the relationship between this man and him. Regarding his father, it wasn't that he had never asked his mother about it since he was young, but his mother had always treated him as a child and had never told him the truth. She only said that his father was a military officer who had gone to the front line but had disappeared without a trace. In fact, this was not the first time he had suspected that his father was someone else. He didn't care who his father was, though. Mommy was enough for him. He didn't care if he didn't have a daddy. In any case, with or without him, his life would not change at all, right? Chapter 67. However, just because he did not care, it did not mean that he was not curious. Children had an inexplicable sense of respect and reverence for their fathers since they were young. Yu Yu had also had such fantasies. How could he not wish to be like other children? To return home and have a loving father and mother who would protect him and form a warm family with him. However, for as long as he could remember, he had seen his mother living alone. There was no man in the family who could support her and she was bullied. That time, he had seen a father accompanying his son to watch a remote-controlled racing car in the park. He had yearned for it so much. However, the more he yearned for it, the more he could not get it. Over time, his reverence for his father had turned into resentment. Now, the concept of a father did not matter to him. It was fine as long as he had his mother. It did not matter if he did not have a father. He did not care. Now, he had everything. No one would have guessed that although he was only 6 years old, he was already the largest shareholder of Wuxia Holdings. Wuxia Holdings was the world's largest toy supplier. Its supply chain was spread across North America, Europe, and Asia. Many children were proud of owning toys from Wuxia Holdings. He held 60% of the shares of the board of directors. Not only that, he was also the chief toy designer of Wuxia Holdings. Every toy he designed became the new favorite of children and became popular all over the world. While other children were playing with their toys, he was already worth hundreds of millions. However, Yunshisha was still in the dark about all this. She just lacked an opportunity to tell him the truth. While she was deep in thought, the doorbell rang. Then, there was a dong sound. It sounded like someone had slumped against the door. Then, there was Yunshisha's weak voice. It sounded like she had been ravaged. Yu's eyes flashed. The scheming look on his face disappeared and was replaced by the cute and innocent smile he always had in front of Yunshisha. He ran to the door, opened it, and threw himself into his mother's arms. Mommy! Let's go home. Yu waited so long for Mommy. When Yu raised her head, she saw Yunshisha, who looked haggard but was still forcing a smile. Mommy is back. Yunshisha was exhausted. As soon as she entered the house, she heard the sound of the washing machine running. The warmth of home immediately surrounded her and drove away the haze of the night. She was so happy to have a Yu in her life. Especially with such an obedient and sensible son. Yunshisha was so touched that the tip of her nose tingled. She didn't even bother to change into slippers before she opened her arms and hugged him tightly in her arms. His entire body seemed to be filled with vitality. Who said that daughters were their mommy's sweet little cotton-padded jackets? Her precious Yu was even more caring than the daughters of other families. She then thought of a certain man. They were clearly father and son. How could the son be so cute, charming, gentle, and considerate? How could the father have such a cold face all day long, like a living iceberg? Genetics really couldn't be trusted. Yunshisha looked at Yu's face. Suddenly, Muyaja's enlarged version of Yu's handsome face appeared in front of her eyes. Her heart instantly shrank. Chapter 68. Yu couldn't help but worry when he sensed that she was sensitive to her emotions. Mommy, what's wrong with you? Nothing. Don't worry, Yu. Mommy will protect you well and won't let anyone take you away from Mommy. Yu was stunned. He frowned slightly and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. However, it disappeared quickly and he regained his gentle smile. Mommy, what are you saying? Yu has always been Mommy's baby. You will always be Mommy's baby. Yunshisha was touched and comforted when she heard that. She didn't dote on her precious son for nothing. She cupped little Munchkin's face and kissed him passionately. Baby, Mommy loves you so much. Stupid Mommy, come in quickly. The cold wind was blowing gently outside the window. Seeing that Yunshisha's nose was red from the cold, Yu couldn't help but give her a sideways glance. He immediately went in to prepare slippers for her. Yunshisha entered the house and threw her bag on the sofa. However, she caught a glimpse of the magazine on the table. In that instant, she saw the cold-looking man on the cover and her face turned pale instantly. Yu, what's on the table? It's just an entertainment magazine that I bought casually. Yu smiled and walked to the table calmly. He kept the magazine in his bag calmly. Yun Shishir heaved a sigh of relief. You, don't buy such rubbish entertainment magazines in the future. You can't imagine how the adult world is like. You couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. He didn't even bother to roll his eyes. Although he was young, he was no less experienced than his mother. He knew better than Yun Shishir how dirty the adult world was. Yu set the table for her, scooped a bowl of rice for her, and placed her favorite dishes in front of her. His service was top-notch. No matter how big or small, he took good care of her. Yun Shishir enjoyed her precious son's service with a clear conscience. Her heart was so full of satisfaction and happiness that it was about to overflow. Stupid mommy, hurry and eat. Yun Shishir picked up the bowl and wolfed down the food. Yu glanced at her coldly with a look of disdain. Her table manners would scare a group of people away. She was usually quiet and demure when she socialized and compared it to what she was doing now. Mommy. Be more demure, you have to be more reserved when you eat. You have to eat your food. Yun Shishir, however, did not think much of it. This was their home, why should they be so reserved? Don't worry, we're not so much. Yu learned how to cook when he was 4 years old. He was a good learner and could make delicious dishes just by looking at a recipe. Until now, he could easily cook French, Western, and Chinese dishes. His cooking skills were comparable to those of a star-rated chef. Yun Shishir always ate what he cooked. Sometimes, when she went to the restaurant, she felt that the food made by the chef was tasteless. This made her even more worried. She could not live without Yu. In a way, she was a successful mother for being able to raise such a son. In another way, she was a mother but did not do any housework at home. Her son, on the other hand, was proficient in all aspects of housework. She was really a failure of a mother. However, Yu did not eat. He just looked at Yun Shishir quietly. Suddenly, he crossed his arms and supported his chin lazily. He smiled and looked at her. Mommy, Yu, can I ask you a small question? Yun Shishir did not think much of it and ate a mouthful of rice. What's the question? Yu smiled. Who is my daddy? Chapter 69. Before she could finish her question, Yun Shishir choked on a mouthful of rice, and her face flushed red. Yu smiled elegantly. He nonchalantly scooped a bowl of soup for her and thoughtfully patted her back. Yun Shishir hurriedly drank 2 to 3 mouthfuls before she could swallow it down. She then looked at Yu with a look that said, "Do you know something?" Why did he suddenly ask this question? Could it be that the child's sharp senses had detected something? Yu could see the panic and helplessness in her eyes at one glance. He then gave her an innocent smile that said, "I don't know anything." Yun Shishir smacked her forehead. Yu had asked her this question when he was very young. At the crucial moment, she casually made up a lie to dodge his question. Hence, after so long, she could not remember what she had answered back then. If her answer was different from back then, and Yu remembered it, would it not be contradictory? After hesitating for a moment, Yun Shishir decisively changed the topic. Hey, baby, come over and massage mommy's shoulders. My back is aching after a long day of work. As soon as she said that, she saw Yu giving her a disdainful look. Yun Shishir broke out in cold sweat. Yu, what's with that look? She felt guilty for staring at him like that. Yu sighed. I really don't know what to do with mommy. He got up and sat beside Yun Shishir, massaging her shoulders with his little fists. Yunlan secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She had finally gotten away with it. Little did she know that the little boy, who was behind her, was looking at her guiltily. Yun Tianyu carefully observed her expression. Seeing her doubtful look, he slowly said, I called you this morning, but why was it an uncle who picked up? What? Yun Shishir was stunned. Could it be that man? Who is that uncle? Yu Yu's childish voice made her extremely nervous. Yun Shishir cautiously asked, did that uncle say anything else? Did he ask for your name? No. Even if uncle asked, Yu Yu wouldn't tell him. Yu Yu pouted. Didn't mommy teach you not to tell strangers my name? Yu Yu, good boy. You're my good Yu Yu. Yun was extremely gratified. Yu Yu even asked uncle to give mommy a raise. Yu Yu innocently and romantically tilted his head, revealing his pearly white teeth with a smile. Yun Shishir's eyes welled up as her voice became slightly hoarse. Yu Yu will never leave mommy, right? Yu Yu immediately replied, Yu Yu will never leave mommy. Why did mommy ask such a question? If. Yun Shishir took a deep breath and carefully asked, if one day, your biological father wants to take you away, no. Yu Yu's mommy's Yu Yu. Yu Yu only loves mommy. The little guy's adorable confession almost made Yun Shishir burst into tears. She hugged the little guy tightly, and the uneasiness in her heart instantly dissipated. No one could snatch her Yu Yu away. No one could snatch him away in this lifetime. Yun Shishir said apologetically, Yu Yu, no matter what, mommy will never leave you alone at home again. Yu Yu was hugged so tightly that his little face turned red. However, his two little hands kept patting her shoulders as if to comfort her. Chapter 70. Yun Shishir paused and said half-heartedly, when I was eating. I accidentally bit it. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw Yu Yu looking at her with an extremely helpless expression. Mommy, how did you eat? How could you bite such a small part? Please use your brain when you're lying, okay? Did she really think that he was a 6-year-old child? Although he was really only 6 years old. Yun Shishir felt awkward when the child saw through her lie, but she still coaxed him. It was really a bite. Although she didn't bite it herself. However, Yu Yu was just as sensitive as his father. He narrowed his eyes and asked, who bit you? Yun Shishir felt a headache coming on at the thought of that man. Genetics was a wonderful thing. At this moment, the father and son were so similar. She laughed dryly and said, Mommy accidentally bit it. Seeing that she didn't want to talk about it, Yu Yu didn't force her to explain it to him. He only pursed his lips and said, Mommy, if anyone bullies you, just tell Yu Yu. Yu Yu will protect mommy. Yun Shishir could not help but laugh. This child was clearly only 6 years old, but sometimes, he gave her the illusion that he was more mature than she was. It was as if his mind was more mature than hers, he was calm and composed. However, she didn't think much of it. She just thought that Yu Yu was worried about her. Touched, she kissed his forehead and hugged him. Yu Yu smiled warmly, but his heart was throbbing with pain. Mommy was still so young. At this age, she should be enjoying the beauty of youth, but she had to face the burden of maturity at such a young age. For him, she studied and worked while raising him. She had tasted the taste of hardship at a young age. When she was breastfeeding, she couldn't bear to leave anything good for him. Life was slow, and she was so tired that her body almost collapsed. There were many times when he couldn't help but want to tell her that he could take care of the whole family and protect her now. However, he was a little worried. He was worried that if mommy saw him like this, would she be able to accept it? Would she not look at him like he was a monster? This morning, he flipped through the bills for the past few months and saw a string of shocking numbers on the bills. With just a glance, he couldn't help but be shocked. The place they rented was an apartment near the school district in the city center. The environment was elegant, and most importantly, it was safe. Not to mention the shockingly high rent for the time being, just the monthly property management fees and utilities were shockingly expensive. That was not all. She had always wanted to give Yu Yu the best environment to study and the best space to grow. Therefore, she had always given him the best food and clothing. This was also a huge expense. After deducting this from her monthly salary, there was very little left. In the past, her monthly salary of 20,000 yuan was tempting, but in reality, it disappeared like water once it was in her hands. Mommy, don't work so hard in the future. Yu's heart ached when she saw this. If Yu doesn't go to an aristocratic kindergarten or an extracurricular class, life won't be so difficult. Yu's gaze softened as she spoke. But last time, I heard from Auntie Xiao Shui that acting used to be Mommy's dream. If Mommy still has dreams, Yu will definitely support Mommy. Okay. But don't frown every day. Yu's heart will ache for you. Yun Shishir smiled apologetically and pretended to be relaxed as she clapped her hands. Eat. Mommy was wrong. The 3 rules stated that I can't bring my bad mood from work to home. You made so much delicious food today, but it's all gone cold. It's Mommy's fault. As she spoke, Yun Shishir smiled and started eating. Yu sat quietly at the side. Her eyes were like crescents, and they seemed to be filled with a circle of fragmented moonlight. Yun Shishir had always been strong in the face of setbacks, so she quickly erased all the unpleasant scenes from her memory. Chapter 71. In the afternoon, Yun Na received the invitation that she had been dreaming of. However, she received a warning call from Li Dongqiang. When she picked up the call, she heard a furious interrogation from the other end of the phone. Yun Na, you wretched wretch. Do you King know who you've offended? I'm in deep trouble because of you. She was baffled by his words and clearly did not understand. Brother Chang, what's wrong? That elder sister of yours looks young and harmless, but her background is not small. I can't even touch a strand of her hair, can I? Yesterday, I just wanted to play with her. I didn't even touch a finger of hers, but I almost lost an arm. I didn't expect her to have a sugar daddy. She caused me to offend the most important person in the capital. She almost killed me. Yun Na was a little confused. Brother Chang, what do you mean? Why can't I understand? You still don't understand. The man on the other side was furious as he shouted at her, then I'll make it clear to you. Your sister has a sugar daddy behind her. As for who the sugar daddy is and what his identity is, it's not something a commoner like you has the right to ask. Yun Na was shocked when she heard that, but she smiled and said, Brother Chang, are you kidding? My sister is also a commoner. How could she have a sugar daddy? She also has a child from a previous marriage. I don't know which bastard she had with outside. How could a woman like her have a sugar daddy? You must be kidding. Yun Na's face was full of disgust when she thought of Yun Shishir. Wasn't she just a pair of used shoes? Was Brother Chang joking with her? Ha, do you think she's you? Your sister's trash is the type of woman that many big bosses like. Let's not talk about it anymore. You owe me 200,000 this time, and you have to give it to me with interest. If you don't pay it back in 2 days, I'll go to your door and collect the debt. With that, he hung up the phone fiercely. Don't, Brother Chang, Yun Na was stunned. It was obvious that she had not recovered from her shock. At night, Yun Shishir brought Yu back to the Yun family. Just now, when she passed by Yun Na after entering the house, Yun Na saw her and got angry, so she bumped into her hard. Yun Shishir almost fell to the ground. She clenched her fists and turned around. Her eyes were cold, and she was no longer as patient as before. Yun Na glared hatefully at her and said in disdain, You blind tch. Unexpectedly, Pa, Yun Shishir sneered as she slapped the other's face with a crisp and forceful slap. Yun Na stared at her blankly. She actually hit her. In a moment of anger, she angrily said, How dare you hit me? Yun Shishir paused and calmly turned around. Her face was neither cold nor hot. Look at you, who else am I supposed to hit if not you? Li Yan was shocked. She couldn't believe that Yun Shishir, who had always been weak and timid, dared to disobey her. Despicable wretch, are you trying to rebel? Why? Are you looking down on me when my dad isn't home? The prerequisite is that you're a human. Yun Shishir curled her lips and retorted curtly. Yun Na was furious and raised her hand high to slap her. B*TCH, I'll kill you. Paw. The slap landed on her face. Fortunately, Yun Shishir dodged in time, so it didn't hurt or itch. Yun Shishir sneered. Turning around, she grabbed the woman's collar and pushed her against the wall. Smack. Her palm landed on the woman's face. Chapter 72. She returned the slap tenfold. He did not hold back at all. Yun Na was caught off guard and took the full brunt of the blow. Yun Shishir did not intend to let her off just like that. She slapped her again. She had obsessive-compulsive disorder and had to be symmetrical on both sides. Now, both sides of her cheeks were clearly imprinted with 5 fingerprints. Her beautiful face was somewhat ruined. Yun Na flew into a rage out of humiliation. She was proud of her beautiful face and usually protected it well. Now that Yun Shishir had actually hurt her face, she simply wanted to strangle this B*TCH to death. She rushed forward to wrestle with her, but Yun Shishir grabbed her wrist and twisted it in the opposite direction. Yun Na cried out in pain and tried to grab her hair. What are you all doing? An angry roar came from the door. Yun Yeching stood at the door and looked at the chaotic scene in the living room. His eyes were red with anger. Stop it, all of you. Are all of you rebelling? Dad. When Yun Shishir saw him return, she immediately concealed the originally cold expression on her face without a trace. In the blink of an eye, an aggrieved expression appeared on her face. Yun Na is too much. As she spoke, she even sobbed a few times as if she had suffered a great grievance. Yun Na was dumbfounded. With Yun Shishir's character in the past, she would swallow her teeth and never complain to Yun Tianho, no matter how aggrieved she was. Now, she had learned to pretend to be innocent. Yun Na was flustered. Her face was still burning. Who was the one who had gone overboard? Her weakness and helplessness were truly piercing and pitiful. Anyone who saw such a pitiful look would feel heartache. Yun Yeching was even more heartbroken when he saw this. A pair of sharp eyes glared fiercely at Yun Na, causing her to shudder involuntarily. Hearing the strange noise, Li Qin walked out of the room and saw this scene. She saw the swollen fingerprints on her daughter's face. Mom! This B*TCH hit me. She even called me a B*TCH. Who are you calling a B*TCH? Li Qin was furious when she heard this. She pointed at Yu and yelled at Yun Shishir, the Yun family will not acknowledge you two bastards and will not raise an unfilial daughter like you. Yun Shishir sneered. Yu walked forward and held Yun Shishir's hand. She turned to look at Wan Fong and revealed a charming and deep smile on her handsome and adorable little face. Auntie, don't worry. I'll take care of Mommy. You don't have to worry. You have money, you should think about how to take care of your face. Hearing this, Li Qin's, Li's, Yun Shishir's. She was originally beautiful, but after giving birth to Yun Na, stretch marks appeared on her face. In addition, she was middle-aged, and her appearance was no longer as beautiful as when she was young. No matter how she maintained her beauty, it was useless. Yu's poisonous tongue stabbed right into her sore spot. Look at this child. She looked so innocent and adorable at such a young age, yet she could say such vicious words. She choked on her words. Yu looked up and tugged at Yun Shishir's sleeve. Her tender voice was innocent and harmless. Mommy, do you know what disgusting means when a disgusting mommy opens the door for disgusting? Yun Shishir asked with a smile, what does it mean? Yu glanced at the mother and daughter nonchalantly and said, it's disgusting to the core. Hearing this, Li Qin realized that the child was mocking her. Furious, she rushed forward and raised her hand to slap Yu, but Yun Shishir grabbed her wrist. You unfilial daughter. How dare you hit my daughter? Do you want to hit me as well? Yeqing, look at Nana's face. It was slapped by this little b*tch. Without waiting for him to respond, she lifted her head to look at him. Yes. I slapped her. But your daughter is restless outside. She gambles and takes drugs. She's in debt and caused me to lose my job. Yesterday, she almost caused me to. She did not continue speaking in her embarrassment. You can say that I'm born to a mother but not raised by one. You can say that I live and eat your food, but I'm not a lowly servant who has to listen to your whims and be used by you. I have my dignity. How can you enslave me like this? Yun Shishir said with forbearance. Chapter 73. Li Qin was speechless for a moment. These words coming out of her mouth were what Li Qin had told her in the past, and she actually remembered them all. In the past, Yun Shishir was too weak and could be bullied by any Tom, Dick, or Harry. Things were different now. She would no longer tolerate and give them a taste of their own medicine. Whatever they had treated her in the past, she would return it to them one by one. Li Qin could not take it anymore. She walked over and grabbed her arm, but before she could speak, Yun Shishir glanced coldly at Li Qin's hand on her shoulder and expressionlessly ordered, "Take your hand off me." Her tone was filled with inviolable arrogance. Li Qin was stunned and widened her eyes in shock. She was infuriated by her cold attitude. Do you still see me as your mother? Yun Shishir snorted inwardly, but she put on a sweet smile and said, didn't you say that I was born without a mother? You've never admitted that I'm your daughter, but now you're asking me if I see you in my eyes. Li Qin finally could not take it anymore and said unhappily, humph. It's a good thing that your mother didn't raise you when she gave birth to you. Otherwise, she'd be angered to death to see you bring back a little b****-starred child. Yun Shishir's cold eyes revealed a dangerous look. Ha! You should be more concerned about your daughter. Ask her what trouble she has caused you outside. Yun Na hurriedly fanned the flames and said, Dad. Look at that. She's framing me. Yun Shishir, you b****tch. Not only did you hook up with other men outside, you even imitated others and gave birth to a child out of wedlock and even brought back an illegitimate child. How unfilial. How many people will point fingers at the Yun family if this matter gets out? They'll say that the daughter of the Yun family was spoiled by men outside and gave birth to a b****-starred child alone. Now, you're here to frame me for taking drugs outside. Do you have any evidence? This Yun Na had always been good at putting on a show. She was a two-faced villain behind the scenes. Ever since she was young, she liked to tease her, bully her, and ostracize her along with Li Qin. She even deliberately made up stories about her in front of Yun Yeqing to sow discord between them. Dad, do you believe her, or do you believe me? Yun Shishir stared at him, determined not to give in this time. Dad! Don't listen to this bitch's nonsense. You have to believe me, I'm your biological daughter. Shut up. Yun Yeqing could no longer hold himself back. He had always believed in Yun Shishir unconditionally because he had always seen her compromise for the greater good. He did not expect that she had suffered so much when he was not at home. Li Qin, I think you're getting worse and worse. Shishir is still a child. You're so cruel and merciless. Where's your conscience? When Yun Yeqing saw that Yun Na was not retorting and was only cowering in a corner guiltily, he naturally understood that she was feeling guilty. Sure. gambling and taking drugs. Yun Na, you've really made Dad proud. It's not like that. Dad, let me explain. Yun Na said with teary eyes. Shut up. You be asterisk starred. Yun Yecheng was so angry that his face turned pale. He gave Yun Na a hard slap across her face. That night, Yun Yecheng gave Yun Na a hard slap in front of Li Qin for the first time. The belt lashed across her back, leaving a mark of disappointment for her failure to live up to his expectations. Even after leaving the Yun residence, Yun Shishir could still hear the hoarse sobs of Yun Na, who was kneeling outside the living room door. Since she was young until now, Yun Na had never suffered such humiliation, and she probably hated him to the bone now. These punishments were nothing to Yun Shishir. The things that Li Qin and Yun Na had done to her in the past were still engraved in her mind. Needle pricks, palm slaps, hair tearing. Chapter 74. In the taxi back to the apartment, Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking a little unhappy. Seeing his gloomy expression, Yun Shishir reached out to pinch his tender cheeks. Yu, what's wrong? Are you unhappy? Yu snorted coldly. Mommy, they're all bullying you. I hate them. I hate Grandma. Yun Shishir frowned. She knew that Yu's heart ached for her. Although this child was usually gentle and cute in front of her, she had long sensed that Yu was different from other children since he was young. Due to the hardships of his childhood, he was sometimes mature from a young age. In addition, he was born smart, so he could understand her situation very well. He was sensible and obedient, rarely being willful, and he was always on her side. She patted his little head and smiled. Mommy is the happiest person in the world with Yu, so don't bother about them. Yu pursed his lips and cupped Yunlan's cheeks with his little hands. Mommy, don't be sad. If anyone makes Mommy angry in the future, Yu won't be polite to them. Yun Shishir didn't take it seriously and only thought that he was joking. She couldn't help but laugh and tease him. Yu, good boy. Mommy didn't dote on Yu for nothing. Yu raised his brows and his tender lips curled up elegantly. A trace of mesmerizing gentleness flashed across his dark jade-like eyes. As long as Mommy is happy, Yu is willing to do anything. A devilish smile flashed across Yu's eyes. Mommy, Yu can really protect you. When the mother and son returned to the apartment, the manager called and asked her to attend a drinking party at the Crown Hotel. She hurried over. The huge Crown Hotel was luxuriously decorated and dazzling. Yun Shishir originally planned to sleep, but the company called and said that the artist she was in charge of was going to have dinner with a big boss, so she was asked to come over and take care of it. As she was rushing towards the banquet, she suddenly caught a glimpse of an extremely familiar figure in the luxurious corridor covered with red carpets. At the end of the corridor, a little boy of about 5 or 6 years old was walking slowly with a servant following him. His figure and back were shockingly similar to Yu's. Yun Shishir's heart was startled and frightened. Unexpectedly, she followed him like a ghost. She was very careful and did not make any sound as she walked on the expensive carpet. However, the handsome boy's hearing was amazing. He turned around alertly and bumped into Yun Shishir. Her perplexed gaze fell on the boy's handsome and tender face. In that instant, her heart surged. Yu. His black hair was very smooth, especially under the reflection of the retro wall lamps in the corridor, which made his hair look even softer and brighter. With fair skin, rosy cheeks, a high nose bridge, and a small red mouth, the little guy's facial features had the beautiful and deep lines of a European descendant, but it did not lose the gentle aura of an Asian. He had a pair of big, watery eyes with long, curved eyelashes that were thick and soft, long and curly, and slightly upturned like 2 black feathers. His black jade-like pupils were as bright as the galaxy, ethereal and mesmerizing. They were also like dazzling diamonds, without a trace of impurities and breathtaking. However, there was only coldness in his eyes now. Although he was young, he had the aura of an emperor. His exquisite facial features were exactly the same as Yu Yu's. The only difference was that between the two children, one was deep and cold, while the other was gentle and elegant. Chapter 75. This child. Could it be? Yun Shishir was taken aback by the conjecture in her heart. 6 years ago, she signed a contract with that man and gave birth to twins. As Yu Yu was born prematurely, her breathing was weak when she came out. A careless nurse mistook her for no signs of life. Her brother, on the other hand, was taken away by that man. Yun Yeqing had erased all traces of Yu Yu. It was already a blessing for her to be able to keep Yu Yu by her side. However, as a mother, she could not afford to ignore her own flesh and blood. For the past 6 years, she had been secretly sketching the outline of another child she had never met in her mind. This child must be very similar to Yu Yu. He must have the same eyes, nose, and beautiful face as Yu Yu. However, he didn't expect that the two children were so similar that they were carved from the same mold. Yun Shishir stared at him in a daze. Unknowingly, tears welled up in her eyes. She never thought that she would be able to see this child again in this lifetime. There seemed to be an intimate bond between mother and son. It was like a bond. Mu Yichen's character was like Mu Yage's. He never liked a stranger staring at him so blatantly. However, looking at this woman who was suddenly defeated in front of him with tears streaming down her face, his cold and hard heart softened in an instant. Who are you? Mu Yichen turned around and sized her up suspiciously with a wary look on his face. Yun Shishir heard his young voice, which was very similar to Yu Yu's. For a moment, she could not help but walk toward him. Mu Yichen retreated vigilantly, subconsciously not letting her near him. The few helpers standing behind him hurriedly blocked Yun Shishir's path when they saw her approaching. Who are you? You're not allowed to go near the young master. Yun Shishir opened her mouth but was tongue-tied for a moment. That's right. Who was she? Did she think that she could recognize this child? But his own flesh and blood was right in front of him, yet he couldn't recognize him. What kind of pain was this? What kind of irony was this? She smiled and said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm not a bad person. I won't hurt you." Mu Yichen's heart was warmed by his mother's gentle smile. He had never seen such a warm smile before. For as long as he could remember, his father rarely smiled in front of him. On the other hand, his mommy often smiled at him, but there were too many complicated things in her smile, which sent chills down his spine. For the first time in his life, this strange woman made him feel the tenderness of a mother. In an instant, a white light flashed in his mind, as if too many thoughts had entered his mind. But, they were strangers after all, so he didn't show any signs of closeness. Then why are you staring at me? I don't like it. Mu Yichen warned her, but his tone was not as cold as usual. It was only faint and emotionless. Yun Shishir smiled and was about to reply when an unfamiliar female voice came from behind her. Who's standing there? Yun Shishir turned her head in shock, only to see an elegantly dressed woman standing behind her, coldly sizing her up. However, the moment Yun Shishir turned around, that woman instantly raised her guard. Yun Shishir. Chapter 76. Mu Wanru was shocked. She didn't expect to meet her again here. After not seeing her for more than 10 years, the weak and helpless girl in her memory had grown into a beautiful, pure, and refined girl. The peaceful years didn't seem to have left any traces on her body. Even though she didn't put on any makeup, she was still shockingly beautiful. She was so young that she looked like a high school student. Yun Shishir also saw her and a white light flashed across her mind. She felt that this face with thick rouge looked familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere before. However, she couldn't remember exactly where she had met her before. She only felt that, she looked extremely familiar. Mu Wanru felt her hair stand on end from her stare. She secretly gritted her teeth. How small was this capital? Why did the person she didn't want to see the most appear right in front of her? Ever since she found out that Mu Yaja was investigating her identity, she had been plotting how to get rid of this thorn in her flesh. Now, it seemed that enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. She pursed her red lips and attacked Yunshushu step by step. She asked in a condescending manner, "Who are you? What are you doing in this hotel? Did you register at the front desk? What's your occupation? What's your identity? You're dressed so shabbily. Do you have the right to step into this 6-star hotel?" I'm an artist's assistant at Huanyu Entertainment." "Which artist? What's her name?" Mu Wanru didn't have the patience to listen to her. She only wanted to chase her away and not appear in front of her and Xiao Yichen. "Mommy!" Mu Yichen calmly called out from behind her. Yunshushu instinctively turned around and suddenly realized that this child wasn't calling her mommy. Mu Wanru expressionlessly pushed Yunshushu away and walked in front of Xiao Yichen. Her face was no longer cold and indifferent. Instead, it was filled with motherly tenderness. "What's wrong, baby?" Yunshushu looked at this scene and suddenly realized the woman's identity. She was the woman who slapped her in the villa 6 years ago. She was that man's fiancée. Because she was infertile, she chose to be a surrogate in order to continue the family line. That scene was still fresh in her mind. He still remembered that this woman looked down at him as if she was looking at a lowly beggar. "I'm tired. I want to go home," Xiao Yichen said briefly. He was a man of few words. Mu Wanru smiled and said, "Good. I'll ask Auntie Gue to bring you back." Auntie Gue hurriedly stepped forward to take Xiao Yichen's hand and was about to leave when the little fellow suddenly turned around and looked deeply at Yunshushu. His thin lips were tightly pursed as he followed Auntie Gue out. Only Mu Wanru and Yunshushu were left in the corridor. Yunshushu reluctantly looked at Xiao Yichen's receding figure. Mu Wanru suddenly stood in front of her and looked at her arrogantly. "Miss Yun, we meet again." "Hello." Yunshushu stepped back slightly. Her sharp aura was too piercing, so she had no choice but to keep a distance from her. "How have you been these past few years, Miss Yun?" Mu Wanru's thin lips curled into a cold smile. Her lukewarm greeting made Yunshushu feel strange. "Do you still remember me? I'm the young madam of the Mu family. We've met before." As Mu Wanru spoke, she approached her step by step. However, it seems like Miss Yun has completely forgotten the contents of the contract. His cold and mournful questioning caused people to tremble in fear. The last clause of the contract stated that Yunshushu would lose custody of the child forever. Chapter 77. Yunshushu's face was pale as she said slowly, "I haven't forgotten any of the terms in the contract. Madam Mu, don't worry. I won't appear in your son's life." "Really? You mean what you say?" "Yes." Yunshushu gritted her teeth, her heart bleeding. Mu Wanru's face finally revealed a smile, but it was extremely cold. "Then I hope that Miss Yun will not forget what you said today and will not go against the terms of the contract. If I find out that you've come to disturb my son and me again, I'll make you regret it." She inched closer to Yunshushu and warned her coldly. However, when they were so close, Mu Wanru could easily see the hickeys on her neck, and her gaze turned cold. Last night, Mu Yaja did not return. She had sent someone to investigate, and in the end, she saw him enter a suite in the hotel's CCTV. In the morning, Mu Yaja, who was dressed in a suit, left first. In the afternoon, a girl in a dress followed Mu Yaja's assistant out. Although her head was lowered and her face could not be seen clearly, regardless of whether it was her figure or her back view, it was exactly the same as this woman. At this moment, looking at the ambiguous hickeys on her neck, Mu Wanru could not help but let her imagination run wild. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, and the veins on her forehead bulged. B*TCH. She raised her hand and was about to slap her. However, a childish voice came from behind her. "Mommy. I've been waiting for you for a long time." For some reason, Xiao Yichen had returned and coincidentally saw Mu Wanru raising her hand to slap her. He raised his voice to stop her. Mu Wanru was shocked. When she turned around to face the little munchkin, her face was full of gentleness. "Yichen, didn't you ask Auntie Gue to bring you home?" "Mommy, aren't you coming home for dinner?" Xiao Yichen sized her up with a strange expression. She didn't know if he was protecting Yun Shishir or for some other reason, but he said calmly, "Daddy said that he'll come back for dinner tonight." Hearing this, Mu Wanru didn't want to waste any more time on Yun Shishir. She would have plenty of opportunity to verify the facts of what had happened last night. However, she would not let Yun Shishir off so easily. Sooner or later, he would make her disappear completely from the capital. This thorn must be completely eradicated. Thus, Mu Wanru turned around and glared at her fiercely. Then, she picked up Xiao Yichen and left with him. Yun Shishir couldn't come back to her senses for a while. So this child's name is Yichen. For a moment, too many complex emotions surged in her heart. They were sour and bitter. It was such a heart-wrenching thing to see her own flesh and blood calling another woman mommy. However, she still remembered the terms of the contract from 6 years ago. After giving birth to this son, they were destined to be strangers for the rest of their lives. It was cruel, but she had to do it. The Mu family was big and had a big business. How could she compete with them? She didn't have the right to be this child's mommy. Yun Shishir took a deep breath, threw her thoughts to the back of her mind, and rushed to the dinner. On the roadside, a Bentley was parked at the intersection. This was a global limited edition car. One look and one could tell that the owner of this car was either rich or respectable. There was a black leather sofa and an expensive Saxon carpet under the feet. At the side, a small wine cabinet displayed expensive wine and vodka. Under the light, they shone brightly. Chapter 78. A man was sitting upright beside him. He was none other than the board representative of Liji Holdings, Li Hanlin. Li Hanlin's facial features were very beautiful, handsome, and elegant. However, his expression was a little ugly, especially when he looked at the 6 or 7-year-old child beside him who was extremely mature. His expression became even more strange. He really did not expect that one of the most mysterious shareholders of Liji Holdings was really a 6 or 7-year-old child. He did not believe it at first. How could it be? When he was 6 or 7 years old, he was still playing with mud. What was wrong with children nowadays? Had their genes mutated? He was so small and looked like he had just been weaned for a few years, yet he was already worth hundreds of millions. Liji Holdings used to be a toy company in Europe that was on the verge of bankruptcy. A year ago, it was acquired by Hurricane Group. In a short period of time, it rose rapidly and became a world-class toy factory. Once Liji Holdings toys were listed, they became popular all over the world. All the children were proud to own a toy from Liji Holdings. Who would have thought that the toys that those children loved so much were actually developed by a 6-year-old child? Who would have thought that the biggest shareholder of Liji Holdings was actually a little boy who had not even finished kindergarten? F***ck. It was too surreal. Who would believe it? However, that was the truth. This shareholder was always mysterious and unpredictable. No one had ever seen his face. He only knew that after Liji Holdings was acquired by Hurricane Group, this shareholder was given power and 60% of the company's shares by Hurricane Group. He was the chief designer of the company's system that was still in development. Until 2 hours ago, when he was summoned by this mysterious shareholder and rushed over, he only saw a little kid who was not even as tall as his waist. When Yun Tianyu revealed his identity to him, Li Hanlin lost his composure and screamed in disbelief. It was only when the little boy took out his voice changer that he verified his identity. If his real identity was revealed to the public, the board of directors would go crazy. Li Hanlin was still a little confused. Yu Yu took a straw and sipped on his cola. He lowered the car window slightly and caught a glimpse of a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. It was extremely familiar. Rather than saying that it was familiar, it would be better to say that it was exactly the same. At the end of his line of sight was a little boy in the same grade as him. A woman was holding his hand as they walked to the front of the Lincoln, and the woman carried him into the car. The little boy was wearing a small suit, and his back was cold. He could only vaguely see his exquisite facial features, which were extremely similar to his, except that his eyebrows were extremely cold. Yun Tianyu's eyes widened in a daze as he furrowed his brows. Why did this boy look exactly like him? The Lincoln started moving slowly. Yun Tianyu immediately ordered, "Follow that Lincoln in front." Director Yun, Li Hanlin quickly corrected himself and said respectfully, "What's wrong?" "Keep up." Yun Tianyu ordered in a tone that brooked no objection. "Yes." The Bentley quickly started, stepped on the accelerator, and caught up with the Lincoln. Following closely behind, the distance between them was not far. Yun Tianyu, who was sitting in the back seat, slowly asked, "Have you found out anything about the person I asked you to investigate a few days ago?" "Yes, all the information is here." Li Hanlin respectfully handed over the materials. Yun Tianyu casually took the thick stack of information and flipped through it expressionlessly. The more he read, the more solemn his eyes became. The Lincoln drove into the capital's wealthy district, Shimao Champagne Lake. This was where the most expensive villas in the capital were located. The people who lived here were of noble status and were worth hundreds of millions. Rumor had it that the average price of a villa here was 500,000 yuan per square meter. It was so expensive that it made people speechless. The Lincoln limousine drove in without any obstructions. The Bentley was stopped at the entrance, however. Yunshan Shi was heavily guarded, and ordinary people were not allowed to enter. The security guard stopped the car. Li Hanlin lowered the window and was about to speak when the security guard at the entrance saw Yun Tianyu. His expression immediately became respectful. "So young Master Mu is back." The license plate was unfamiliar, but the security guard mistook Yun Tianyu for the Mu family's young master. Naturally, he did not dare to slight him. Who dared to stop the Mu family's young master's car? Many doubts flashed across Yun Tianyu's heart when he heard this, but his face remained calm as he greeted, "Hello, uncle." Chapter 79. The security guard was flattered and quickly greeted, "Hello, young master. Please come in, young master." His impression of the Mu family's young master had always been arrogant and indifferent. He would never greet a mere security guard. Now, he was truly shocked. The security guard let them in, and the Bentley slowly drove through the entrance. When the Lincoln came to a stop in front of a quaint and luxurious villa, Li Hanlin instructed the chauffeur to pull over. "Director Yun, what's going on?" Li Hanlin asked cautiously. Yun Tianyu shushed him, indicating for him not to speak. He rolled down the car window and leaned against it to look out. When the little boy alighted from the car, the servant at the entrance hurried to welcome him. His brows furrowed slightly. There were too many questions in his mind at that moment. Mu Wanru alighted from the car as well. When she looked up, she saw Mu Yaja standing at the entrance. He was tall and imposing, but without his suit, he did not seem to be the empire's elite in the business world. His snow-white shirt accentuated his exquisite features. The night was bleak and hazy. All the floor lights in the villa's courtyard were lit. The atmosphere was warm. Mu Yaja squatted down slightly and smiled gently at Mu Yichen. He rarely smiled. Usually, he did not smile and always gave others the impression of coldness. However, it was only in front of Xiao Yichen that he would show this rare tenderness. His beautiful almond-shaped eyes were deep and mesmerizing, and his sexy thin lips curved into a doting smile. It was simply irresistible. A father's warmth was like a harbor, it made one feel incomparably at ease. He flew to North America the day before yesterday to attend a meeting, so he hurried back home after returning. Xiao Yichen was originally angry with him. He waited for him the whole night, but he did not return. His daddy actually did not keep his promise. Accompanying him for dinner, doing his homework, and not talking about work at home were the 3 rules, but he did not abide by them. However, under Mu Yage's doting gaze, the accumulated haze in Xiao Yichen's heart finally dissipated. The little guy rushed into the man's arms and wrapped his little hands around Mu Yage's elegant neck. He muttered, "Daddy." Yun Tianyu, who was sitting in the car, stared at her in a daze. His eyes were unnoticeably moist. However, when he saw Mu Yage take out a beautifully wrapped gift from behind him, Xiao Yichen opened it in surprise. It was the remote-controlled racing car that he had been looking forward to. It was Liji's best-selling toy for the new season, and many children dreamed of owning one. Wow! This is Liji TK01 Smart Remote-Controlled Racing Car. Thank you, Daddy. I'm so happy. Mu Wanru slowly walked over, squatted down beside Xiao Yichen, and kissed his forehead. Baby, let Daddy assemble it with you, okay? All right. Mu Yage smiled dotingly. Baby, have you forgiven Daddy? Daddy is the best. Yichen loves Daddy the most. This heartwarming scene undoubtedly stung Yun Tianyo's eyes. It turned out that a father was such a warm existence. The TK01 Smart Remote-Controlled Racing Car was a product that Yu had painstakingly designed. When it was put into production, the online pre-orders had exceeded hundreds of thousands. The one he saw at the mall that time was just a domestic imitation of a remote-controlled racing car. He was only researching it, but he did not expect his mommy to mistakenly think that he liked it and insisted on buying it. In fact, he did not like toys. He was no longer interested in these things, which were somewhat childish to him. What he envied was having a daddy who could patiently assemble and play with him. What he yearned for was merely companionship. Chapter 80. What he yearned for was merely companionship. Yun Tianyo's little hand gripped the window sill, his eyes filled with desolation. He did not even know what to do. All these years, he had thought that he did not have a father, but now, his father was right in front of him. Just like how Yun Shishir would always picture a child she had never met before in her heart. More than once, he had pictured his father's silhouette in his mind. He must be very tall, with good-looking eyes and a tall nose. He must look dashing in a suit. That was because his kindergarten teacher always praised him for his good looks. His father must be even more dashing. In fact, this man was really handsome. Even he was mesmerized by him. In his heart, he was also looking forward to it. How great would it have been if he had been his father 6 years ago? Unfortunately, Yun Shishir's gentle words suddenly echoed in Yu Yu's mind. Yu will never leave mommy, right? Yes. He would never leave mommy, never. He was mommy's little god of warmth. He wanted to protect mommy and not let anyone hurt her. Even if it was his biological father, he would never allow it. Yu lowered his eyelids to hide the longing that flashed across his eyes as he slowly rolled up the car window. Mu Yaja carried Xiao Yichen and dotingly caressed his little head. From the corner of his eye, he caught sight of an unfamiliar Bentley. He followed his line of sight and saw a Bentley slowly driving away. He could vaguely see a lonely silhouette through the car window. A child of about 6 years old was sitting in the back seat lazily with his head propped up. His eyes were downcast, and he looked a little lonely. His heart skipped a beat as if he had lost something important. Even his breathing stopped for an inch. Xiao Yichen raised his head and saw his father looking into the distance in a daze. He frowned and asked, "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Ah, nothing." Mu Yaja lowered his head and curled his lips, but he was clearly distracted. The banquet was arranged in a VIP private room. Yun Shishir had just opened the door when she accidentally bumped into a lively scene. He saw Han Jingyi sitting in the arms of a fat middle-aged man, hitting the man's shoulder and acting coquettishly. Her shoulders were slightly exposed, and her attire was sexy and alluring. The circle of people sitting around her had a tacit understanding of each other. They just sat on the side and chatted wittily, as if they were already used to this erotic scene. In the circle, there were many unrestrained scenes. They were already used to it. The middle-aged man who was hugging Han Jingyi was the big boss of a real estate development company, Yan Liangxiong. He had a strong net worth and quite a bit of status. He was the one who had raised Han Jingyi to the top. Yun Shishir was not used to such a scene, but she forced herself to fit in as soon as possible and sat beside Han Jingyi. However, the moment he walked in, the atmosphere in the room changed slightly. Originally, Han Jingyi was a young model who had graduated from an art school. Although she was inexperienced, she knew the rules of the entertainment industry and knew the rules. With her good looks, she signed a contract with Huanyu Entertainment. However, after a year of debut, she did not receive any resources and remained unknown. Chapter 81. Yan Liangxiong was obsessed with beauty, and he especially liked young models like Han Jingyi, who had a slim figure and a sweet appearance. Han Jingyi naturally catered to his fancy. She took part in a few reality shows and made a small name for herself. Yan Liangxiong had a lot of assets. He was one of the biggest investors in Huanyu Entertainment's huge youth film, The Green Apple. Han Jingyi's manager was well aware of the unspoken rules of the entertainment industry, so she made an appointment with Yan Liangxiong. She hoped that Han Jingyi could use this opportunity to whisper something in his ear. If she could be the female lead of The Green Apple, her day of success would be just around the corner. Therefore, at the dinner party, Han Jingyi was full of thoughts about this rich and overbearing big boss. This Yan Liangxiong was simply overjoyed by her coaxing. Seeing that the female lead was about to be finalized, Han Jingyi thought. However, when Yun Shishir entered the private room, everyone's eyes fell on her. At this moment, no one was looking at how Han Jingyi was acting coquettishly. Even Yan Liangxiong, who had been aroused by Han Jingyi a moment ago, had lost interest in the young model in his arms. He actually had evil thoughts about Yun Shishir. He had never seen such a pure and otherworldly girl in the world. This is... Yan Liangxiong's voice was soft, as if he was afraid of scaring this fairy-like girl. Han Jingyi's face was full of embarrassment. She had finally coaxed Yan Liangxiong into beaming with joy, but in the blink of an eye, this man's thoughts were no longer with her. She was indignant. She looked at Yun Shishir angrily and said disdainfully, "Oh, this is my new assistant. She's new and doesn't know any better. Why didn't she propose a toast when she came? Are you looking down on President Yin?" When Yun Shishir heard this, her eyes were filled with panic. She hurriedly said, I can't drink." She couldn't hold her liquor and was drunk after 2 glasses. She had never experienced such a scene. Her voice was low, like a lost deer. She was very guilty, but because of her delicate voice, it was very pleasant to the ears. Liang Xiong looked at her tender and white face, and because of that delicate and lovable voice, his imagination ran wild. A girl like Yun Shishir, pure and innocent, was rarely seen in the entertainment industry. Even if there were pure girls, they would be tainted by this big vat of dye. Otherwise, they would be faking it. However, a man could tell at a glance whether a woman was pretending or not. Especially a veteran in love like Yan Liangxiong, he was even more certain that this girl was a rare and precious stunner. This girl was beautiful and had a delicate temperament. What was even more commendable was that she lacked the exaggeration of those female artistes in the circle and had a pure and refined air about her. If he could capture her, then those little wild models in the entertainment industry who couldn't wait to throw themselves at his door and use all sorts of schemes to climb into his bed wouldn't even be able to enter his eyes. Just thinking about it made his body heat up. Yan Liangxiong's heart could not help but itch. Yan Liangxiong looked at Yun Shishir with reddened eyes. You can't drink. That's an excuse, right? As Yan Liangxiong said this, he actually pushed Han Jingyi to the side. Then, he leaned closer to her and sized her up with an extremely strange gaze. That explicit gaze made Yun Shishir's scalp tingle. Even so, she still put on an excellent professional integrity. She cursed this old pervert in her heart and looked down. Chapter 82. I really can't drink. I'm allergic to alcohol. 1 glass and I'll get drunk, just drink a little. Yan Liangxiong was obviously unhappy with her refusal. She can't drink. That's right. It would be much easier to deal with this woman when she was drunk. Han Jingyi, who was pushed aside, was so angry that her face turned red. Who found her an assistant? She was obviously the reincarnation of a vixen who was here to seduce men. Yun Shishir was shocked by the scene of her being forced to drink. It wasn't that she had never entertained clients before, but she had always used tea as a substitute for alcohol. No one had ever forced her to drink. Now that she was facing this situation, she was a little stunned. Han Jingyi saw that Yan Liangxiong's thoughts were all on Yun Shishir, and she hated her to the extreme. Why was this new assistant so beautiful? Look, it had only been a few minutes since she entered the room. Was she trying to steal the souls of all the men in the room? She must have been a vixen in her previous life, right? She was cursing viciously in her heart, but she forced a smile on her face. President Yan, why do you have to lower yourself to the same level as a mere assistant? It's fine if she doesn't know how to drink. She's not even willing to give you face, President Yan. She's obviously looking down on you. Please calm down, I'll fire her right away. She originally thought that by fanning the flames, Yan Liangxiong would be furious at Yun Shishir for not knowing what was good for her. However, in the next moment, Yan Liangxiong's reaction left her dumbfounded. Fire her for? This little assistant is so fun. She hasn't seen the world yet. She'll get used to it after seeing more of it. As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and said meaningfully, Jingyi, didn't you want the resources for the green apple? If you can get your assistant to drink a few glasses with me, I'll make the final decision on the female lead. Han Jingyi almost vomited blood when she heard that. She was about to vomit blood. This movie could be said to be a star-studded movie. Many A-list female stars were lining up to be cast, but none of them were able to make it. After much persuasion, she was lucky enough to hook up with a rich big boss who happened to be the investor of this movie. She was already wild with joy. In order to get the resources for the female lead, she had pestered him many times. She had tried to coax and pester him several times, but to no avail. How could he just let this Yun Shishir accompany him for a few drinks and seal the deal? No matter how stupid a person was, they knew what Yan Liangxiong was thinking about Yun Shishir. Han Jingyi was so angry that she wanted to flip the table. The smile on her face was almost distorted. She had racked her brains to get him and tried her best to climb into his bed, but in the end, she couldn't even compare to a few glasses of wine from an unknown Yun Shishir. It was obvious that he wanted to send her flying. However, on second thought, Han Jingyi realized that if a few glasses of wine could be exchanged for the female lead role, it would be a waste of effort. Since Yan Liangxiong wanted to dump her, so what? She wasn't willing to suck up to him. The entertainment industry was so big, so how could there not be many rich bosses? She could just look for another sugar daddy. With this role, she would be able to get in touch with higher-level aristocrats. This assistant could exchange a few glasses of wine for resources that other female stars couldn't even dream of. This was perfect. As she thought about it, Han Jingyi persuaded, "I say, newcomer, you should drink a few glasses with President Yen. Take it as giving President Yen face. If he's happy, he won't treat you badly." With that, Han Jingyi mouthed to her, "If you don't drink, I'll fire you." Chapter 83. Can I have a glass of wine? I can only drink one glass. Yun Shishir said carefully. Yan Liangxiong liked to look at her tender expression and laughed heartily. Okay. One glass it is. You have to drink it all in one go, or it won't count. Yun Shishir gritted her teeth and made up her mind. She picked up the glass of wine in front of her and drank it all in one go. With just one glass, she choked until her face and ears turned red, and a blush appeared on her ears. Woo! This wine was extremely spicy. Her eyes turned red, and her body suddenly heated up. Looking at her flushed face, Yan Liangxiong's eyes were about to stare straight. That burning gaze never left her body, and it stared at her until she felt like she was being pricked by needles. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Knock knock, someone knocked on the door elegantly, and the door of the private room was slowly pushed open. A cold gust of wind blew in through the door. Yun Shishir was tipsy, and she was a little dizzy. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of someone walking in. Looking in the direction of the sound, she saw a tall figure walking into the private room. She was stunned. What greeted her eyes was a pair of black high-grade handmade leather shoes. The sound of the shoes hitting the ground was crisp and powerful. The man's steps were elegant and calm. He wore a pair of straight and slender trousers, paired with a dark red high-end shirt, and his fair skin accentuated a taboo charm of beauty. His gentle and refined temperament was immediately revealed. Looking carefully, the man's slightly open collar revealed two jade-like collarbones. A platinum necklace hung on his beautiful and delicate neck. It was a simple outfit, but it was stunning. One had to know that not every man could make red look so coquettish and beautiful. Yun Shishir was a little drunk. She felt that her neck was a little stiff, so she couldn't raise her head to look at the man's face. It was only when he came closer that she saw his face. The nobility and arrogance in his gestures, and the trace of melancholy in his eyes, this was the first feeling that this man gave her. His fair face had been washed away. His facial features were deep and exquisite, with distinct edges and corners. It was as if he had been carefully carved by the gods. Elegant eyebrows, long and narrow eyes, and sexy lips. This kind of beauty was difficult to describe with words, so much so that everything in the world was as insignificant as dust in front of him. He looked very young, clearly only around 25 years old, but he gave off an extremely mature and steady feeling. That kind of maturity was not an appearance, but a bearing that came from his bones, which did not match his age. She took a deep look at him and felt that there was a hint of the vicissitudes and coldness that belonged to his youthful appearance. It was complicated, deep, and hard to figure out. Her delicate face stunned Yun Shishir. How could she not be familiar with this cold man in front of her? In the current entertainment industry, Gu Xingze was definitely one of the best in terms of qualifications and net worth. He had created an era that belonged only to him, Gu Xingze. At the mention of this man, his glorious background was the center of attention. He had been discovered by talent scouts when he was studying abroad at the age of 15 because of his stunning good looks. He was invited to sign with an entertainment company, and then he made his debut with a record. His first record sold over 10 million copies, and his first movie was a Hollywood blockbuster. He became famous overnight and won various awards at the Oscars Film Festival. After that, his global popularity soared. Chapter 84. There was no shortage of handsome male artists in the entertainment industry. However, in such a dirty and complicated environment, one would be eliminated sooner or later if they did not know how to fight for it. However, Gu Xingze was a miracle. It was not only because of his enviable handsome face, but also because of his exceptional acting talent and magnetic voice. Gu Xingze became an instant hit from the moment he debuted. From a handsome and delicate young idol with immature acting and singing skills to a superstar who had dabbled in all three fields of film, television, and singing, he had 10 platinum records and was even known as the box office bomb at the beginning of the century. Whether it was his acting or singing skills, he had already honed them to perfection. In the 10 years since his debut, Gu Xingze had become an immortal legend in the entertainment industry. He was also the only person who could represent the domestic entertainment industry and was a milestone in the domestic entertainment industry. The entertainment industry was filled with waves and sand, but his status as a superstar had not been shaken for 10 years. His journey to stardom had been so smooth that many people were jealous of him. There were countless legends about him. In this industry, 10 years was an era. However, the end of Gu Xingze's era was still far away. But, why would he appear here? Once he saw him, Yan Liangxiong immediately stood up and greeted him warmly. He shook his hand. His assistant, who was standing beside him, quickly stepped forward and apologized profusely. President Yan, I'm so sorry. Haha, it's rush hour now. I'm sorry to have delayed you on the way. Everyone knew that Yan Liangxiong was a person who had a strong sense of time. He had always been prejudiced against people who were late. No one was an exception. It was already late. Gu Xingze was stuck in traffic when he received his call. He had arranged to meet Gu Xingze at a hotel to discuss the female lead. Gu Xingze was also one of the film's producers. Although he was engrossed in memorizing the script and had a hard time coming up with his lines, he did not want to neglect this hard-to-please boss and hurried to meet him. However, he was still a little late. Director Yan, why did you ask to meet me here? Is there a reason? Gu Xingze was puzzled. The handover had already been settled, the script had been planned, the actors had been decided, and the sponsors had been decided. What else was there to rush him over in such a hurry? Ha! Xingze, let's sit down and talk. Let me introduce you to someone. Yan Liangxiong turned sideways and invited him to take a seat. Only then did Gu Xingze notice that there was another woman sitting in the private room. Her posture was elegant and her makeup was exquisite. However, there was no aura around her. There was admiration and yearning in her eyes as she looked at him. Han Jingyi wanted to be his female lead even in her dreams. Although she had debuted for more than a year and had been in the industry for a long time, this was her first time meeting the Heavenly King. The real person was even more dazzling and handsome than the photos in the magazines. Han Jingyi didn't drink much, but she felt a little drunk. Gu Xingze had the kind of temperament that could intoxicate any woman. How many women yearned for a male god like him? Seeing this, Gu Xingze could not help but feel suspicious. He looked at Yan Liangxiong meaningfully and waited for him to introduce her. Out of the corner of his eye, his gaze landed on Yun Shishir. At that moment, she was already very drunk, but she stubbornly pursed her lips. Her fingertips were clenched tightly on the table. He did not know what she was angry about. Chapter 85. Han Jingyi wanted to be his female lead even in her dreams. Although she had debuted for more than a year and had been in the industry for a long time, this was her first time seeing the Heavenly King in person. He was even more dazzling and handsome in person than in the photos in the magazines. Han Jingyi did not drink much, but she felt a little drunk. Gu Xingze had a temperament that could make women drunk. How many women yearned for such a male god? Gu Xingze saw this and could not help but feel suspicious. He looked at Yan Liangxiong meaningfully, waiting for him to introduce her. Out of the corner of his eye, his gaze landed on Yun Shishir. At this moment, she was already very drunk, but she stubbornly pursed her lips. Her fingertips were clasped tightly on the table, and he did not know what she was angry about. Her eyes were red, and there was a clear mist at the bottom of her eyes. The emotions on her face were constantly changing. Forbearance, stubbornness, embarrassment. At that moment, she seemed to have stunned his gaze. For some reason, a scene from the script seemed to appear in front of Gu Xing's eyes. The female lead and the male lead had an argument. They got drunk in the bar, one glass after another, and cried bitterly in the noisy music. In the end, they stubbornly endured it. At that moment, they restrained themselves and their hearts broke without a trace. Yin Xiachuan. This girl was Yin Xiachuan. Just as he was stunned, Yan Liangxiong interrupted his daze. Xingze, let me introduce you. This is Huanyu Entertainment's new artiste, Han Jingyi. Yan Liangxiong smiled and leaned closer to him, whispering, Xingze, you've met her. She's pretty, right? I'm sure she has a bright future ahead of her. Please promote her in the future. In other words, was he going to support her? Gu Xingze frowned slightly. His thin lips parted, but he did not say anything in the end. Han Jingyi looked shy and slowly reached out her hand to him. However, Gu Xingze did not even look at her. He had always been proud and arrogant. He never gave face to people he did not approve of. It just so happened that there were quite a few people in the entertainment industry who fell for such a proud and aloof personality. Speaking of which, no matter how beautiful this Han Jingyi was, she was at most an unknown newcomer, right? There was no spiritual energy in her temperament. She was like an empty puppet. What ability did she have to make Yan Liangxiong praise her so much when she had just debuted? Could it be that he had used the unspoken rules to get to her position? There was contempt in Gu Xing's eyes. Beautiful. Is there something wrong with General Manager Yan's taste? Gu Xing's mouth was full of poisonous thorns. With her looks, even if President Yan likes her, she won't be able to enter my eyes. President Yan, don't think that you can promote the woman you've slept with just because you want to. It's not up to you to decide the female lead of this movie. You know, I'm also one of the producers of this movie. Yan Liangxiong was taken aback, and his expression turned a little awkward. Ridiculing the woman he was playing with in front of him, more or less put him on the spot. Gu Xingze had been in the industry for many years. He had a strong backing and a high net worth. Naturally, he did not dare to offend him. However, this kind of humiliation also made him lose face. When Han Jingyi heard this, she was as stiff as a rock. The male idol in her heart actually ridiculed and humiliated her in front of so many people, making her lose face. Chapter 86. Xingze, don't call me Xingze. Do we know each other well? Gu Xingze looked at her coldly. Yan Liangxiong could not put down his pride and immediately gave her a look. Han Jingyi quickly raised her wine glass and toasted him. I'm sorry. Mr. Gu, I don't know how I have offended you. If I have offended you in any way, I hope that you will forgive me. However, her pitiful apology only made Gu Xingze more disgusted. Don't. The wine you're toasting is dirty. Han Jingyi was stunned. She felt as if she had been smashed to pieces. Earlier, she had heard rumors that Gu Xingze was as arrogant as a king. Sometimes, he would not give face to those he detested, and his mouth would be poisonous. Now, she had experienced it for herself. Moreover, President Yan, is there something wrong with your taste? This woman is tacky and smells of rouge. How can she play the role of the pure Yin Xiachuan? First of all, her appearance is not right. If I were to act with her, I'm afraid that I would vomit. Gu Xingze continued to use his poisonous tongue. Han Jingyi could no longer sit still. Why was this Gu Xingze's mouth full of poisonous thorns? He was mocking her as if she was worthless. There were so many female celebrities in the entertainment industry. How many of them relied on their own abilities to get to where they were? Didn't they rely on flattery? She was so angry that she was about to cry. Gu Xingzi snorted when he saw her trying to act pitiful. She wanted to be his female lead and climb up his social ladder? Dream on. Why? Do you still feel wronged? Gu Xingzi's face was cold. If you know what's good for you, you'd better quit the production of the green apple. Otherwise, I won't be in the mood to work when I see you. After a pause, his gaze fell on Yun Shusher, who looked a little confused. He was stunned. What's your name? Yun Shusher saw that Gu Xingzi was asking for her name. Although her mind was still in a daze, she sat up straight and said nervously, Hello. My name is Yun Shusher. I'm Miss Han Jingyi's assistant. Are you her assistant? Gu Xingzi was a little surprised. He had thought that she was a newcomer who had just signed a contract. She was pure and beautiful, untainted by filth, and very much in line with the temperament of the female lead in his heart. The yin xiaochuan in his heart was exactly the same as her. Gu Xingzi shook his head. His beautiful eyes curved and a warm smile appeared on his face. She's so clean and pretty. Why did she become the assistant of a nobody model? How useless. I also just found a job today. Gu Xingzi glanced at Han Jingyi, whose face was getting darker and darker, and sneered, she won't be able to become famous. You'll have no future if you follow her. As for you, you're so much prettier than her. If you enter the entertainment industry, you'll definitely be popular. Han Jingyi's eyes widened in shock. How could Gu Xingzi? With such a beautiful mouth, he had degraded her to the bottom of the valley, and then praised an unknown assistant to the sky. Where was she supposed to put her face? Yun Shusher had not yet recovered from the alcohol. When she heard this, she hurriedly waved her hand and said, I can't, why not? Gu Xingzi smiled elegantly and said slowly, your temperament is just right for the female lead in my heart. Bang! Han Jingyi could not take it anymore. She slammed the table and stood up. She looked at Gu Xingzi with a gloomy face and sneered, Gu Xingzi, have you said enough? Chapter 87. She had drunk some wine earlier and was a little tipsy. With Gu Xingzi flattering her and belittling her, she was naturally unhappy, especially after being belittled by her idol. With the alcohol in her system, she decided to let it all out. Isn't she just a new little assistant? How can she be compared to me? Han Jingyi was angry. Every girl had a dream, and her dream was Gu Xingzi. When Gu Xingzi debuted, he had always been her idol because of his handsome image and superb acting skills. She had always seen Gu Xingzi as her beacon of hope. Hence, when she turned 18, her dream became even more passionate. She swore to herself that she would enter the entertainment industry and become a celebrity. That way, she would have more chances to see Gu Xingzi. Hence, she hardened her heart and took her parents' savings to travel around Korea. So what if she was not born well? Nowadays, the plastic surgery industry was booming. She could get double eyelids, a delicate nose, and a good figure. She signed with a modeling agency and easily entered the entertainment industry. For the sake of Gu Xingzi, she almost went crazy and did everything she could. Even though she did not have the talent for acting, she used some underhanded methods to gain some fame. She was getting closer and closer to her dream. Gu Xingzi, on the other hand, destroyed this hope of hers. How could this little assistant, who came out of nowhere, compare to her? You are Yun Shusher, right? You don't have to come to work tomorrow. You're fired. Han Jingyi lashed out at Yun Shusher in exasperation, venting all her anger on the latter. Yun Shusher was stunned. She felt that she had been unjustly implicated. Gu Xingzi smiled and said, coincidentally, I am lacking an assistant. Shusher, are you willing to be my assistant? Before he finished speaking, everyone at the table was in a mess. Who was Gu Xingzi? He was a superstar in the entertainment industry. He was arrogant and had a net worth of hundreds of millions. His popularity was at its peak. The line of people who wanted to be his assistant stretched from here to Hollywood. Many people were racking their brains just to be one step closer to their idol. Now, he was asking an unknown girl if she was willing to be his assistant? This world was simply too fantastical. Yun Shishir was also stunned. Are you not willing? I will pay you a high salary. Also, I am very gentle with my subordinates. I am much easier to serve than this woman. Yun Shishir heard this and said, I am willing. Gu Xingze heard this and his eyes filled with gentleness. Then you can come to my studio to officially report tomorrow. As he said this, he stood up gracefully and said to Yan Liangxiong, who was already stunned, it is getting late. President Yan, I will not keep you company. Everyone was stunned. Gu Xingze pushed the door open and was about to leave. When he turned around, he saw Yun Shishir still sitting there in a daze. He said helplessly, my little assistant, it is so late. Shall I take you home? Oh. Yun Shishir was a little dizzy. Superstar Gu wanted to take her home. Would his fans throw darts at her and spit at her? Yun Shishir stood up obediently and left with Gu Xingze. Yan Liangxiong came back to his senses and spat angrily. He was naturally unhappy to see the beauty in his mouth being snatched away from him. Chapter 88. There was someone who was even more unhappy than her. Han Jingyi said, How am I not as good as this B***tch? I think she must be the reincarnation of a vixen, born to seduce men. Forget it, Han Jingyi. You should think of a way out. Yan Liangxiong sneered. After Gu Xingze's words, he couldn't help but think that this woman in front of him was just an ordinary woman. Compared to Yun Shishir, she was nothing. She was like a wildflower by the roadside. He didn't like her. What do you mean? Han Jingyi was confused. You're still a newbie in Huanyu. How dare you go against Gu Xingze? So what? Han Jingyi had already given up on Gu Xingze. Being mocked by her idol was like being stabbed in the heart. I think you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Don't you know? Gu Xingze holds 20% of Huanyu Entertainment's shares. He's one of the company's major shareholders. Even I have to act according to his wishes. Who do you think you are? How dare you slam the table with him? Don't even think about working in this industry anymore. Wait for your contract to be terminated tomorrow. What? Gu Xingze is a major shareholder of Huanyu. Oh my God. Han Jingyi gritted her teeth. She was so regretful that her intestines were turning green. President Yan, what should I do? I don't want to be fired. Han Jingyi cried and begged. I can't save you. Look at you. You have big boobs but no brains. You don't think before you speak. You're making me unhappy. Yan Liangxiong waved his hand and left. Just as he left the hotel, Gu Xingze turned around. Yun Shishir walked unsteadily and bumped into his chest. Ouch. She rubbed her forehead. She was a little dizzy. Gu Xingze pinched Yun Shishir's nose and said helplessly, Silly girl, why don't you thank me for saving you from the tiger's den? What do you mean? Yun Shishir was still a little confused. Naturally, she didn't understand the meaning of her words. You're not in the industry, so you don't know what kind of person Yan Liangxiong is. He leaned over and looked into her eyes. His breath smelled like orchids. He likes girls like you. You're so pure, innocent, and tender. If you didn't come out with me just now, you would have been eaten alive by him. Are you scared? Gu Xingze saw that she was in a daze. He couldn't help but love this girl who was as pure as a little white rabbit. He rubbed her head affectionately. This industry is like this. Materialistic people like you will be eaten alive sooner or later. Yun Shusher was still a little shaken. She said gratefully, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would have been in deep trouble today." If it weren't for him, she really didn't know how to face Yan Liangxiong, who wanted to eat her alive. "Let's go home then." Gu Xingze patted her shoulder. "What time should I report for work tomorrow, then?" she asked with a smile as she trailed behind him. "You really want to be my assistant?" Gu Xingze didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It's very hard to be my assistant. Not only do you have to do public relations for me, but you also have to deal with paparazzi. What's worse is that you have to face situations like today. Can you handle it?" Yun Shusher suddenly realized that being an assistant wasn't an easy task. "Then you asked me if I was willing to be your assistant." Chapter 89. "I was helping you get out of trouble," Gu Xingze said matter-of-factly. "You must be a very sensible girl, right?" Gu Xingze looked at her and suddenly said, "You must have suffered a lot just now, but I didn't see you shed a single tear." I'm used to it." Yun Shusher's shoulders shrunk a little when he touched the most vulnerable part of her heart. Gu Xingze leaned over slightly and smoothed her bangs. His lips curled into a gentle smile. "But you're a girl. Why do you have to be so strong? A crying child will get sweets." Yun Shusher was a little stunned. Since she was young, she had been very sensible and strong. She was even overly stubborn. Even if she had suffered a lot, she had never said a word. She had endured it all by herself. But the more she endured, the more she had to bear. She pursed her lips and smiled at Gu Xingze. "Thank you. I understand what you mean. Yes. You're a girl. You have to make good use of your advantages." Gu Xingze suddenly thought of something and a smile flashed across his eyes. "It's a pity that you're my assistant. But with your talent, it's a waste if you don't act. Huan Yu is investing in a movie called The Green Apple. They're holding a nationwide audition for the female lead. Do you want to try?" Yun Shusher's eyes flashed when she heard this. She couldn't help but struggle in her heart. "This is the invitation. Tomorrow is the last audition. I'll be there." Gu Xingze handed her a small and exquisite letter. This letter was more exquisite than a normal invitation letter. It was inlaid with gold and had a piece of satin lace. It was a first-class invitation letter and there was only one of it. Gu Xingze gave it to her. It went without saying that he valued and appreciated her. Outside the window, it was raining. Gu Xingze's assistant rushed over. He was stunned when he saw a thin girl beside him. "Xingze, this is, oh." Gu Xingze didn't know how to introduce her. Yun Shusher was a little dizzy because of the wine, but she still forced herself to stay awake and smiled politely. "Hello, my surname is Yun Shusher." "Oh, Shusher. That's a very nice name." The assistant smiled gently. The three of them chatted for a while before heading to the parking lot. The Bentley was parked by the roadside. After waiting for a long time, Yun Tianyu finally saw his mother's figure and wanted to get out of the car to meet her. Li Hanlin immediately stopped him. "Director Yun, it's raining heavily outside. You should wait in the car." "Yes. I'll have to trouble you then." Li Hanlin smiled and got out of the car with an umbrella. Gu Xingze's nanny van was parked not far from the Bentley. Just as the three of them were about to get in, a man in a suit got out of the Bentley in front of them. "Miss Yun, I'm here to pick you up." Gu Xingze looked at the man and then at the expensive luxury car behind him. For a moment, his eyes were filled with doubt. This man, who looked like a dragon among men, was very respectable, yet when he looked at Yun Shusher, he was incomparably polite and gentle. Who was he? Why was he here to pick up Yun Shusher? It was not that he had never seen such a scene before. Many female artistes in the entertainment industry looked pure and clean on the screen, but in reality, they had sugar daddies behind them. They would do anything to get ahead, be it drinking or sleeping with others. No matter what dirty methods they used, they would do anything to get ahead. He had been in this industry for many years and knew how muddy the waters were. A-list female artistes often had a few sugar daddies behind them. Once one was tired of her, he would dump her to the next. Women were like commodities for him to enjoy. Chapter 90. Yun Shishir was confused. She did not know the man in front of her. Who are you? Li Hanlon's smile did not change. He leaned closer to her and said softly, Young Master Yun is waiting for you in the car. Young Master Yun, you. Yun Shishir's expression changed again and again. She looked at the car in shock and panic. However, she saw Yu leaning against the window and waving at her with a warm smile on his face. Only then did her heart calm down. Gu Xingze, thank you. You don't have to send me off. Be careful on the road. Shishir, are you all right? Gu Xingze was a little worried when he saw this. He did not know where this man came from, so he was naturally worried. His assistant beside him could not help but feel a little confused. What was wrong with Gu Xingze? She had been in the entertainment industry for so many years, but she had never seen the cold and arrogant Gu Xingze look at a woman more than once. Gu Xingze was an ascetic handsome man. She had even doubted his sexual orientation. However, the young lady in front of him was indeed different from other women. She had delicate features and an aura that no one in the industry could compare to. I'm fine. Don't worry. Yun Shishir smiled and hurriedly followed Li Hanlon into the car. Gu Xingze looked at her and was stunned. He then smiled helplessly. He seemed to have lost his composure today. Perhaps it was because he had seen too many dirty tricks in the entertainment industry. Now that he saw an unbelievably pure woman, he actually had some inexplicable emotions. He actually wanted to protect this purity of hers. Gu Xingze sighed softly. He walked slowly into the nanny van and left. Yun Shishir got into the Bentley. She was stunned by the gorgeous scenery in the car. She had never sat in such a luxurious car. She had only seen it on TV. Yu, why are you? Yu rolled his eyes. Obviously, he would not tell her his true identity. If he said it out loud, he was afraid that mommy would not be able to take it. For the past 6 years, he had always played the obedient card and played the innocent role. If he told the truth, his mommy would never believe it. Mommy, this is Uncle Li. He's the principal of my kindergarten. Li Hanlon was also quick-witted and immediately followed up. Nice to meet you, Miss Yun. Nice to meet you. With a smile on his face, Li Hanlon was in disbelief. He looked at Yun Shishir with an unfathomable gaze. God, what was the background of this young and beautiful woman in front of him? She looked like a high school student who had yet to graduate. Could it be that she had saved the galaxy in her past life by giving birth to a genius like Yun Tianyu? How did she give birth? Can you tell me the trick? He also wanted to go back and do some research. He wanted to give birth to a child as smart as Yu. Li Hanlon beat his chest and stamped his feet in his heart as he looked back and forth between the mother and son with envy. He also wished he had such a considerate and warm son. Yun Shishir smiled. Hello, Principal Li. I've been busy with work. Thank you for taking care of Yu these past 2 years. Li Hanlon's lips twitched. He was a little confused. You're too kind. Yu is so smart and has been performing well all this while. Principal. How could a principal afford to drive such a car? Yun Tianyu smiled and interrupted this topic. Principal, thank you for sending me and my mommy home today. You're welcome. Li Hanlon smiled and immediately instructed the chauffeur to start the car. The Bentley slowly started moving. However, the three were unaware of it. Not far away, a Bugatti Veyron followed closely behind. Chapter 91. Wuxia, who was in the driver's seat, looked ahead and tightened his grip on the steering wheel. As they sped along, the night view flashed past the window. Yunshisha really treated Li Hanlin as the principal of her kindergarten and kept asking him about Yu's situation in school. Principal Li, as a mother, I'm really incompetent. How is Yu's performance in school? Did he cause you any trouble? Li Hanlin maintained a polite smile on his face, but he was about to cry in his heart. It was too difficult to act out this act. He turned his head and looked at Yu helplessly. The little one saw that he was in a difficult position and couldn't help but snicker. His beautiful eyes curved into crescents and he looked exceptionally beautiful. Mommy, didn't the principal say that Yu's performance was very good? He stuck out his tongue. In fact, his performance in kindergarten was quite good, especially his popularity in the school. Not only was he smart, but his delicate and handsome face also made him the little male god in the hearts of many little Lolas. The girls who wanted to hold hands with him lined up from the school gate to his classroom door. Even the teacher doted on him. The boys in his class were also very respectful towards him. Along the way, the three of them chatted happily. The Bentley soon stopped in front of the apartment building. At this moment, the night was already a little chilly. Yunshisha carried Yu out of the car. The cold wind blew and both mother and son shuddered. Yu buried his head in Yunshisha's chest and gave him a look. Li Hanlin immediately came forward and put his coat on them. Before Yunshisha could thank him, a beam of high beam shone on the three of them. The beam of high beam was extremely strong and was accompanied by the low roar of a high-performance sports car's engine. Vroom. 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 The sound came one after another. It was as if an angry lion was growling threateningly, glaring at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. It was ready to pounce on them in the next second. Yunshisha was a little frightened. She subconsciously pulled Yu into her arms and covered his eyes. The beam of light was so strong that she could not open her eyes. Li Hanlin also covered his face with his hand, and his face gradually became sullen. Damn it, this sports car's headlights must have been modified. They were so strong that they almost blinded people. Just as he was about to explode, the headlights went out. The roar of the sports car's engine also quieted down. Tranquility returned under the night sky. Yunshisha was in a trance for a while before her vision finally cleared up. She glared at him angrily. The sports car was parked quietly under a street lamp not far away. It was a silver Bugatti Veyron convertible sports car. With its streamlined lines, it was obvious that it was expensive. However, when she saw the cold-looking man in the driver's seat of the sports car, she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Wuxia sat in the driver's seat with a gloomy expression. A cigarette that was about to burn out was held between his fingers, and the sparks flickered. The ashes fell on the exquisite steering wheel, as if his eyes were covered with dust. He sat motionless, as handsome as a god. His handsome face, which looked as if it was carved by the gods, was extremely tense at this moment. Especially his deep eyes, which were like an abyss, could not wait to devour the soul of the woman in front of him. There was anger in his eyes, but even he couldn't understand why he was so angry. He, Wuxia, actually lost control because of a woman. Chapter 92. He didn't understand why he had lost control. He only knew that something in his heart had been ruthlessly torn apart. Now, he couldn't suppress that anger at all. It was mixed with things that he refused to admit. Desire, jealousy, and unwillingness. He had originally chased after the Bentley. When the car left, he vaguely saw the young, unfamiliar, yet inexplicably familiar face. In his shock, he drove over and happened to see Gu Xingze and Yunshisha leaving the hotel together. He also happened to see Gu Xingzi gently brushing Yun Shishir's hair away from her forehead. They were so intimate, everyone in the industry knew about Gu Xingzi's indifference. On the surface, he looked as gentle as jade, but in reality, he hated being close to female artists in the industry. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness and didn't like to be too close to people. Could it be that this woman was like those other women, unscrupulous in order to climb up the social ladder? It was only after Yun Shishir got into the Bentley that he found it increasingly difficult to restrain his anger. She really had a husband. She had children. When he thought that she might already have a family of her own, this anger and restlessness seemed to be about to burst out. Along the way, he followed closely behind until the car stopped in front of the apartment building and saw the scene. It was like a warm and harmonious family of three. The heartwarming scene was so heartwarming that it hurt his eyes. Mu Yaja took a deep puff of his cigarette. His slender fingers crushed the cigarette but outside the window. He slowly got out of the car and closed the door with a bang. The sudden and heavy sound made Yun Shishir take a step back in shock. In an instant, too many distracting thoughts flashed through her mind. Only one firm thought emerged in her mind. She couldn't let this man take Yu away. Yun Shishir was shocked and scared. She turned around and handed Yu over to Li Hanlin. She raised her head and handed the keys to Yu. She stroked his head and said with trembling lips, Yu, go upstairs and wait for Mommy, okay? Mommy. Yu looked at her with a complicated gaze. She was naturally worried. Good boy, Mommy will come up to accompany Yu soon. Yu, go upstairs first. Good boy. Yu could not help but clench his small hands into fists as he nodded obediently. Yes. Li Hanlin had a complicated look on his face as he carried Yu upstairs. Yun Shishir's thin body shivered in the cold wind. She turned around with a pale face and met the man's cold eyes. Mu Yaja looked at her coldly. His eyes were probing and cold. They were as sharp as a sword. He stared at her as if he wanted to see through her frail body. Yun Shishir felt uncomfortable under his gaze. It was as if he was going to pierce through her body. You. What do you mean by this? Are you following me? She questioned him, but he remained silent. He only raised his feet and moved closer to her. The aura on his body was too strong. As he approached, it was as if there were countless invisible sharp auras spreading out endlessly, surrounding her body. The man stood in front of her arrogantly. His intimidating height made her seem so weak. She was so weak that she was like a porcelain doll. It was as if he could crush her with a light pinch. What are you doing? She widened her eyes warily. Chapter 93. Before she could defend herself, the man took a big step forward and forced her to the corner of the wall. His tall figure came over and trapped her in the corner. There was no way to escape and no way to retreat. Mu Yaja bowed his head expressionlessly and easily controlled her in his world. He was as arrogant as an overlord who ruled over the life and death of all things. He pinched her chin and forced her to look up to meet his face. His voice was as tense as a frozen zither string. Who is this man? Yun Shishir was a little stunned. Her silence angered him even more. Who is this man to you? Yun Shishir looked at him in shock. Mu Yaja frowned and tightened his grip on her chin. In an instant, he hurt her and she cried out softly. Ha! Speak. Yun Shishir was embarrassed and angry. She pushed him hard with both hands, trying to break free from his control. However, there was a huge difference in strength. No matter how much strength she used, the man did not move and forced her even more. Be good. Tell me, who is he? Mu Yaja leaned in close to her face. Under the dim moonlight, his handsome features came into view. Husband. Yun Shishir's thin lips trembled and she shook her head. Muyaja furrowed his brows slightly, but his thin lips coldly spat out two words that were like ice cubes crashing against each other. Lover. Yun Shishir flew into a rage out of humiliation. She stared at him coldly and gritted her teeth. No. No. Muyaja stared at her, his lips curled into a smile. His slender and cold fingertips rubbed against her lips lightly and heavily. His eyes were cold. Then, that child, Yun Shishir was stunned and her face turned ashen. Her eyelashes trembled violently and her eyes darted around, not daring to look at him. The man narrowed his handsome eyes. He could see that she was so afraid that her whole body was trembling. It was as if she had a guilty conscience and was about to be exposed when she was trembling with fear. Why was she so afraid? What exactly was she afraid of? He recalled the scene earlier and felt that this woman's behavior was so strange and fishy. Yun Shishir held her breath and lowered her eyes in horror, not daring to look at him. At this moment, her heart was already in turmoil. This man mentioned that child. Could it be that he had already found out about Yu's identity? No. She had hidden it well for the past 6 years. Yun Yeqing had a good personal relationship with the hospital's director, so he had taken care of all matters, no matter how big or small, so there would not be any leaks at all. He wouldn't know. Even if he knew, she wouldn't compromise a single step. Muyaja raised a brow and coldly. Sit. Did I hit the nail on the head? Muyaja smiled. What's the difference between you and those women? You're just trying to climb the social ladder and marry into a rich family, aren't you? He looked at her. His eyes were filled with disappointment, coldness, and some complicated emotions that she could not fathom. In the middle of the night, she went to a banquet and got into a stranger's luxury car in a drunken stupor. And this man was neither her husband nor her lover, yet he behaved so intimately. She even had a child with her. If he was not an illegitimate child, then what was he? Chapter 94. In the entertainment industry, there were too many women like her, who flirted with men and dreamed of marrying into a wealthy family. She was even willing to pay any price to get married. In the world of fame and fortune, there was no woman who was clean. On the surface, she looked pure and innocent, but after peeling off that beautiful outer layer, she hid an extremely greedy heart. This woman looked pure and innocent, but maybe it was all an illusion. When he thought of how this woman was seductively pleasing other men, Muyaja's gaze turned even colder. Yun Shishir could feel the terrifying cold air around him. Before she could retreat, the man had already grabbed her waist and pulled her to him. She exclaimed in shock and her cherry lips were instantly sealed. Muyaja lowered his head and fiercely sealed her lips with his. His pearly white teeth grazed her lips as he sucked on them tightly and savagely. She had nowhere to retreat. With a loud bang, her back was pressed against the cold wall and the back of her head hit the wall. Everything in front of her was dazzled. No, you don't want it. Muyaja opened his deep-set eyes. He was craving her beauty. Muyaja lowered his gaze and looked down. From his angle, he could see her slightly open neckline and beautiful curves. The scene in front of him made his heart beat faster. He wanted her. He wanted this woman as if he was possessed, that was the most honest thought in his body. He wanted more, but she pushed him away forcefully. No, don't touch me. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly heard the sound of the window opening upstairs. Immediately after, a basin of cold water poured down and drenched him. The cold water seeped into his collar and slid down his back. The night wind blew, and it was chilling. Muyaja was stunned. Yun Shishir gasped. The angle of the basin of water was very precise. Not a single drop splashed on her body. She looked at Muyaja anxiously, only to see that his face was as dark as a stormy cloud. He raised his head abruptly and saw the little one leaning against the window on the 3rd floor, looking down at him condescendingly. The night was dark and it was hard to see the boy's facial features clearly. However, his exquisite silhouette could be seen clearly under the moonlight. He propped up his little head with a devilish smile in the corner of his eyes. His crisp and childish voice slowly said, "It's not good for a man to bully a woman like this, right?" Muyaja's eyes were so dry that he couldn't see the child's face clearly. However, he was surprised to see that the child's facial features were very similar to Xiao Yichen's. Vaguely, they seemed to be carved from the same mold. "We're both men, but I feel ashamed for you. What kind of man are you to bully a woman?" "Humph." With that, Yu called out, "Mommy, don't stoop to his level. Quickly come upstairs, we won't play with him." Yu's soft and adorable voice actually made her feel at ease. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment before she hurried upstairs. Yun Tianyu gave Muyaja a deep look before slamming the window shut. Muyaja's brows furrowed slightly. His face was as stiff as ice until the vibration of his phone pulled him back from his thoughts. The call connected, and Yun Tianyu's cold and childish voice came from the other end. "Muyaja." Muyaja's eyes glinted with surprise. Yu's voice gradually turned cold. "Yun Shishir is my mommy. She's the woman I'll protect for the rest of my life. I won't allow you to let her suffer even the slightest grievance, much less make her sad." Yu paused for a moment before his voice suddenly turned gloomy. His childish voice seemed to have been frozen in ice as he said, "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to bully my mommy and make her sad? If I see you let my mommy suffer even the slightest bit of grievance, I won't let you off." Yun Tianyu paused for a moment. His eyes softened for a moment before they were filled with complicated emotions. "Muyaja, I'm giving you one last chance. Family, or enemies. You can choose one." With that, he hung up the phone. Yun Tianyu's eyes drooped. Deep down, he yearned for his father's protection and love. The scene that he saw today was still replaying in his mind. Compared to a strong man, he wanted to have a harbor that could shelter him from the wind and rain. How wonderful would it be to return home and be warm? Even if he was his biological father, he would not allow his mommy to suffer even the slightest bit of grievance.